Okay, we've got a hot mic about ready to go in a few seconds. Sharing around the link, everyone. How you going? Let me know in the chat. Ready for a fun night? Hello, everyone. How are you going? Welcome. Welcome. I'm just sending out some invitations through the social medias so people can join us for this video and looking at some other videos tonight from the exciting world of the Senate. Is the audio good? Am I stuffing it up like I usually do on these live streams? Let me know. Let me know. Okay, hang on. What did I forget? That's it. Team and Discord. I've got to share it there. How are we all going? Is everyone celebrating? What happened in the UK? Is anyone surprised? It's all good. Thank you, pub. Got my stein of coffee. It'll be interesting to see. I mean, that's one hell of a majority that that they got over there in the UK. I mean, what is it? UK election results. 364. 203 for Labour. Just nuts. Well, there you go. Oh, they got over 200. I'm surprised. Okay, guys. So, I thought tonight we would continue on with our adventure looking at all the wonderful material from the witnesses to the Economic Legislative Committee dealing with currency restrictions of the use of cash 2019 bill. And I thought we'd skip the Law Council because they're lawyers. So I thought we'd jump to the Reserve Bank and Austrac, and then if we have time we might have a look at the Treasury and ATO, but we may do that on another day. We'll see how long it goes, guys. So what I've done is I've just attached the full video there. Now please let me know how the audio goes. And I've just discovered actually I can speed up the playback, so that would have probably been good yesterday with our poor gentleman from the funeral directors who was speaking like a funeral director. He was the stereotype, to be quite honest. At least that's what I thought. So here we go, guys. Let's get started. And the first up is the favourite organisation for all of us, the Reserve Bank of Australia. And before we get there, I'll just bring up everyone's favourite chart about the Reserve Bank. Their predictions for wage growth. Okay, their predictions for wage growth. It's all good. Here we go.
Committee inquiry into the provisions of the currency restrictions on the use of cash bill 2019. I welcome officials from the Reserve Bank of Australia. Thank you very much for appearing before the committee today. I remind officials that the Senate has resolved that an officer of a department of the Commonwealth or of a state or territory shall not be asked to give opinions on matters of policy and shall be given reasonable opportunity to refer questions asked of the officer to superior officers or to a minister. This resolution prohibits only questions asking for opinions on matters of policy and does not preclude questions asking for explanations of policies or factual questions about when and how policies were adopted. I advise that our questions on notice need to be back by the 10th of January 2020. For the Hansard record, could you please state your names and the capacity in which you appear?
Yes, I'm Anthony or Tony Richards, and I'm Head of Payments Policy at the Reserve Bank.
I'm Richard Finlay, and I'm a Senior Manager in the Note Issue Department of the Reserve Bank.
Great, thank you very much for being with us today again. And
none of these men have pocket squares. See? You know, just how much classier they would look if they had a pocket square. Come on, ladies. Let us know in the comments what you reckon.
And did you wish to make any opening remarks?
Right. Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Chair. I do. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before the committee. Let me begin by stating that the Reserve Bank is supportive of policy measures to combat the black economy. We do not have particular expertise in the area of tax policy enforcement in the black economy. But as background for the committee, we thought it may be useful to begin with a brief opening statement on the role of cash in Australia's payment system. And we're happy to leave this statement for you and for Hansard.
Great, thank you very much.
The Reserve Bank has 4 roles in the payment system: as policymaker or regulator of the payment system, as issuer of Australia's banknotes, as operator of Australia's real-time gross settlement system, and as a provider of banking services to the government. And we'll be very happy to answer any questions relating to the bank's payments policy and note issuing roles. The bank has powers under the Reserve Bank Act and the Payment Systems Regulation Act, which are to be directed towards controlling risk in the financial system, promoting the efficiency of the payment system, and promoting competition in the market for payment services, consistent with the overall stability of the financial system. In addition, the Reserve Bank Act tasks the bank with issuing and redeeming Australia's banknotes. In this role, the bank issues cash as it is demanded by financial institutions, which are in turn responding to demand from their customers. In the bank's role as regulator of the payment system, it seeks to promote a payment system that meets the needs of end users, that is, households, businesses and government entities, in terms of being convenient, low cost and safe and reliable. While there's always room for improvement, and the Governor made a speech on Tuesday that noted some areas.
Yes, and we streamed that speech, didn't we, guys?
I think we can say with some justification that Australia's payment system ranks pretty well by international standards. This is certainly true with the launch early last year of the new payments platform, which allows consumers and businesses to make real-time, 24/7 payments with richer data and simple addressing using pay IDs.
We all remember what was said about pay IDs. It feels... Yes, we're handing over a lot of financial control to a group of organisations, aren't we?
In addition, I note that by international standards, Australia has a fairly low-cost payment system, whether that's measured in terms of the overall resource costs of household payments or the average merchant service fees paid by Australian businesses to accept payment cards. As you'll be aware, over the past year or so, there's been a significant shift from cash to electronic payments in everyday transactions. We see evidence for this in the data in the value of cash withdrawals from ATMs, which peaked in 2009 and have been falling gradually since then. We also have some information about the use of cash from a survey of household payment patterns that we undertake every 3 years. We contract a survey firm to ask at least 1,000 Australians to record all the payments for goods and services they make for a week. Participation is voluntary, but we ensure that we match population benchmarks, and the aggregate results generally match other aggregate information on payment patterns. Our first survey of consumer payments in 2007 showed that around 2/3 of household payments were made in cash at that time. Our most recent survey suggests this had fallen to around 1/4 of all household payments in 2019. This reflects a range of factors relating to household preferences and advances in technology, and it indicates that many households are increasingly finding that electronic payments are better meeting their needs for many types of transactions.
And I just want to draw attention to a comment that Ray has just made that I think is spot on, mate. Wow, reduced cash transactions without the RBA input. So why with the cash ban if we're going down the path ourselves? Exactly. Exactly. It's like all these nutcases that think, we're going to overpopulate and die when population is just naturally reducing its growth. So yeah, no, exactly. Why do we need more legislation? When it's more convenient to not deal with cash. I'm not a person who just only pays in cash. I use tap and go all the bloody time because it's convenient, but I want to have the freedom to do it and not be a criminal if I want to go and put 10 grand on something.
Our surveys show that cash is primarily used in low-value transactions, with cash used in around 2/3 of payments under $10 in 2016. The average size of all cash transactions was $28.
$28, guys. So what's the point? Is this counting FPOS? It wouldn't be counting FPOS payments for marijuana in the Northern Territory, would it? No, that's different. Sorry.
Our surveys also show that cash is still a very important payment method for a significant proportion of the population, especially for older and lower income households, those living in regional and remote areas, and those with disabilities. We should also note that the value of Australian banknotes outstanding continues to grow despite their falling use in day-to-day transactions. This appears to reflect growing use of banknotes as a store of value. Reserve Bank research published late last year suggests that only around 1/4 of our outstanding banknotes by value are used to buy and sell things.
Well, there you go. I wonder if that's got to do with the decline in consumer confidence. I wonder. People are hoarding money.
While around 2/3 are held as a safe store of wealth by residents and foreigners. Indeed, our surveys also confirm that many households hold cash as a store of value and for precautionary purposes.
Well, let me put that over to the chat, guys. How many of you store some cash just as a safety buffer? Even just $1,000 in cash all around.
We estimate that the remaining 10% or so of issued banknotes are split roughly evenly between banknotes that are lost and banknotes that are used for shadow economy activities. But as long as...
Oh, so we've got to get rid of all of the cash bans. So Martin did a video on the ATMs as well, the FPOS as well. Does he reckon we need to ban them too? Because it's in the black market economy.
Physical currency continues to play an important role in the payment system and the broader economy, including as a backup for when the electronic payment systems are down. The Reserve Bank will ensure that our banknotes are high quality and secure from counterfeiting. The current banknote series upgrade reflects this commitment. Finally, and relevant for today's hearing, we can provide a little information on the use of cash in high-value transactions by households. When we look across the 5 household surveys we've undertaken since 2007, we have a total of about 82,000 consumer payments by 5,700 individuals. Among those 82,000 payments, there were 20 transactions reported for more than $10,000. None of those used cash.
So then why the hell are we implementing this legislation? Why do we need it? Why do we need it? Why are we limiting our civil liberties? And why are people like the United Church person getting to talk to these leaders and not other people? I see you've all got cash lying around or in safes. Good to see. I'm not surprised.
But to get a slightly bigger sample of large transactions, we might look instead at transactions between $5,000 and $10,000. Altogether, there were 61 transactions over $5,000.
Can someone refresh me? Did he say 82,000 transactions and there were just 61 over $5,000? Ray is saying, here we go. 82,000 over 10 years against a population of 20 million. And Thomas is saying they usually leave out the rural areas because they're harder to survey, yeah. But I'll bring back Ray's comment here. 82,000 guys over 10. Why are we discussing this? I need a coffee.
One of these was in cash. Nearly half of these transactions used bank transfers, while other payment methods included cheques, credit cards, BPay, debit cards, and PayPal, in that order. So while we cannot rule out that some reporting bias, including because some people may be reluctant to report all their spending for privacy reasons, our survey suggests that very large transactions by households are very infrequent, and when they occur, they typically use electronic payment methods or occasionally cheques.
So why do we need this legislation?
I'll be happy to answer the committee's questions.
Thank you very much. Thank you for providing that to us. Alex, no objection to that being tabled?
No, cool.
Thank you very much. There's been a bit of commentary which I perhaps you've read about that this bill is somehow linked to the idea of a bank bail-in, or the imposition of negative interest rates, I guess having an impact on Australia's overall monetary policy. A, have you seen some of that commentary, and B, would you care to comment?
Of course, I can talk to that, Senator. I think that discussion is not really relevant for the current bill. The issue for the current bill is should there be a limit on a ban on the use of in business of very large transactions using cash. But the concerns that you referred to, I think, are very different, and it's a scenario that I think is something like this, that somehow this is a precursor to the imposition of negative interest rates and the government deciding to withdraw cash from circulation. I'd make 3 points on that scenario. The first one is that monetary policy is set by the Reserve Bank Board. It's not set by Treasury, the ATO, the Black Economy Task Force, or, with greatest respect, by Parliament. Yep. It's set by the Board according to the mandate that has been given to the Board under the Reserve Bank Act. And the second one is that the Governor has spoken recently on this issue, and talking about the possibility of the policy rate, so that is the cash rate target going, he said that he views the negative interest rates in Australia, the prospect of negative interest rates in Australia as extremely unlikely. And he also made the point that even in countries where the policy interest rate has gone slightly negative, the interest rates received by households on their deposits haven't. There's almost no examples of negative interest rates for household deposits in those few countries that have had negative policy rates. And then the third point I would make is that the notion that cash might be about to be withdrawn seems a little far-fetched. The Reserve Bank and the government have both said in different contexts recently that cash is a very important part of our payment system. And
didn't sound like that when the Reserve Bank governor was looking at that, giving the speech about the electronic transactions, did it? Do you guys remember that one?
Our economy. So with respect, I think some of those concerns that you've alluded to are a little far-fetched.
Thank you very much. Do you monitor the costs of electronic transactions? And I mean, we've had presented to the committee today the idea that a cash transaction is a way of saving consumers money. Yeah. So do you monitor the cost of electronic transactions, and how are they trending?
Yeah. We do. In at least two ways. One way we do it is we publish data in our bulletin on the average merchant service fee paid by businesses to receive different types of cards, debit and credit cards. And those data show that the cost of card acceptance for Australian merchants is actually very low by Australian standards. And it's actually been falling. It's actually fallen significantly over the past 15 years or so. The Payment System Board, which is the Reserve Bank's other board, took some regulatory actions in about 2003, 2004, which have had the effect of bringing down the cost of payments. So the cost of payments in Australia is actually low by international standards. So that's the cost of accepting payments by card. So the cost of debit cards is around, on average, it's around 50 basis points, around 0.5%, and the cost of receiving credit cards is in the order of about 80 basis points, 0.8%, and that's low by international standards. The other thing we do is periodically or infrequently we do a broader survey on the cost of household payments in general for the entire economy, the broad research cost, the broad resource costs, not just the costs paid to banks, but the costs, the times, the cost in terms of the time that consumers spend or businesses spend in making payments, etc. And that data that we've published this data most recently in 2014, I think that shows that Australia has got a fairly low cost payment system by international standards.
And what about
None of what he's saying here really is justification for a ban on transactions, is it? As you're all saying in the comments, there's so few of them at that level. Is this just to prime people? Modify behaviours? Didn't make any mention of BIS, did he?
not even sure this is the correct phrase anymore, but clearance times, the speed and efficiency of a transaction, how have they trended over time? There was a new payment platform put in place, I think, a year ago.
Yes. Yeah.
And is there anything coming up in that regard to I guess, reduce the friction?
Yeah. Clearance times have improved. The payments industry did something called same-day settlement in 2013, which meant that there were clearing exchanges of payment instructions between banks several times a day rather than just once a day. And then, as you said, in early 2018, the industry launched the new payments platform. And that's that infrastructure allows basically instant payments. So I could, using my bank app, even if you're with a different bank, I could pay you, I could send some money to you, and you would have it probably in about 3 seconds.
Wow, so they've caught up to cryptocurrency. They're only, 5 years behind, aren't they? I guess when you've got this infrastructure and these large bureaucratic organisations, making any change in there would be a nightmare.
And that's been gradually rolled out to customers. Most banks have started rolling it out to their household customers, but it's increasingly being rolled out to business accounts too. And so that has very significantly improved the quality of banking services to and electronic payments to both households, businesses, and governments. The government is actually using it to make emergency payments, and it can make payments at night, on weekends, and the recipient gets the money straight away within about 3 seconds.
Finally, from me, there's been some suggestion that this will inevitably drive people to the banks, particularly the big four banks. Are there payment paths that don't involve the banks? And I'm not sure you're qualified to answer that, but if you are. And what percentage of the transaction flows would they be? Do you know?
Right. Well, the bigger picture is that payments are already flowing to the banks. That there's been a significant shift away from the use of cash towards electronic payments, and those electronic payments overwhelmingly go through banks. There are some non-bank electronic payment methods. For example, you could probably think of PayPal as being that,
we also had cryptocurrency raised as a potential pathway earlier today.
Right. Happy to chat about that. I actually have some Bitcoin in a wallet on my phone. I've had that for about 5 or 6 years now, just for purely experimental purposes.
Well, there you go. There you go, guys. And Pubs made the comment, I don't think the Reserve Bank cares either way on the cash ban. Well, they know that there's no bloody use of it. They know that there's no use of it. And Dubkek is criticising senior bureaucrats speaking to the Senate. Oh, mate. I actually, you can catch me when I say and ah. I used to make my students, when they were presenting, I'd count every time they said That's probably considered bullying these times now. And Lulu's reminding us that you need a bank account with PayPal. You should watch my video about getting hacked on Facebook and the quality of service I got from PayPal. Well, watch that one there. That's, yeah, I'm a fan.
And it hasn't become a mainstream payment as a, you know, it doesn't meet many of the things that we would many of the criterion that we would normally attach to money, that it's a stable store of value. Well, it hasn't proved to be that. A unit of account, it's people don't post their prices in Bitcoin. Even Bitcoin conferences don't post their conference fees in Bitcoin.
Jupiter's hard for him to think in non-banking systems. Well, yeah, I mean, it's not surprising. And Thomas, you raise a good point that PayPal bans people for politics, but also banks ban people for politics, don't they? Banks do here in Australia. It's happening already, guys.
And then as a means of payment, well, it's a possible means of payment for person-to-person transactions, especially cross-border ones, but it's not something that people are using in day-to-day transactions. I have actually once used Bitcoin to buy a cup of coffee in Sydney. There's very few places in Sydney that will accept Bitcoin for things like that, but they don't actually want Bitcoin. They would be converting that straight back to Australian dollars. So it's interesting from a conceptual point of view, from a theoretical point of view, but it hasn't become a mainstream means of payment. But it's something we continue to study, and as you're aware, that there are proposals for other forms of stable coins, they're called. Facebook's got a proposal, but you know, it remains to be seen if and when that will ever launch.
Okay. Senator Patrick, I understand you're on the line as well.
Yes, I am. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, excellent. Have you got limited time, Senator Patrick, or are you okay for a bit?
No, I'm okay. I'm on a journey that'll last an hour, I think.
Oh, okay then. Well, in that case, we'll go to Senator Gallagher.
All right.
And then we'll come to you.
Thanks, Chair. Now, I just was struck by one of the paragraphs in your opening statement where you say that you note the value of Australian banknotes outstanding continues to grow. And you go on to say that it appears as if only... does it say there a quarter of the notes in circulation are actually used to buy and sell things?
Yes, yeah.
So what level of notes are in circulation on a daily basis?
It's roughly $80 billion outstanding.
$80 billion are outstanding on every day.
Something like $3,000 per person.
And about 25% of those are used to buy and sell things.
Yeah, and that includes cash in wallets, in tills, in ATMs, in bank branches.
Okay, so it appears as if people have quite legally made a decision to store a considerable amount of wealth in physical banknotes.
Yes.
And, you know, if you extrapolate that out across each household, how much would each household have?
I mean, so I guess if you just take the numbers literally, to be roughly $2,000, but in actual fact, it's probably the case that most households have not very little, and a few households have a lot, and maybe people overseas also hold Australian dollars. So it's unlikely to be spread evenly.
Yeah. I think
so I had the opportunity to go to your facility, I think in Keilor or something like that, where you wanted to put in some extra note-making facilities, and we said, why would you do that? Because people are tapping and going, but that's not true about cash. Cash is growing in circulation, isn't it?
Yeah, the amount outstanding is growing. I should say, I mean, the growth rate has slowed over recent years, but it is still the total amount of cash.
So you're still making lots and lots of notes, and only 25% of those notes are used to buy and sell things.
That's our best estimate, yes.
So we've got this situation where, you know, there's a huge amount of cash there, which now will be impacted by legislation saying that if you have $50,000 under your bed, you can't spend it in more than $10,000 lots. Is that essentially correct?
I mean, that's probably true. You can still deposit it at your bank.
Yeah,
you can still...
I mean, it's legal to get it, it's legal to save it, but you can't go out and spend all of it.
That's the intention of the bill.
I'm liking this this senator. He's switched on, isn't he? Up front. Good. Good.
Why would we do that? Why do we want to stop people from spending their money which they've legitimately saved or decide to park under their bed and not in the bank? Are you suggesting that it's all nefarious transactions if someone has $50,000 under the bed?
Well, this was a recommendation of the Black Economy Task Force.
Okay,
I think
so we're going to go to that.
It was part of the task force. One of many recommendations that was an attempt to reduce black economy activity.
I mean, fully support reducing black market activity, but no one's suggesting that deciding to place your store of valuable notes in cash is a black market activity.
That's what they want to legislate. Make it a crime just to spend that amount.
No, and this bill doesn't talk to that, I don't think.
No, just puts a limitation on how you can spend it once you've got it.
Yeah, I mean, as Tony noted, as far as we know from our data, cash transactions above $10,000 are incredibly rare anyway.
Yeah.
So it's not,
But if people have their store of wealth, whatever they've decided to put in their safe or wherever, the effect of this bill would be to limit how they would be able to spend that.
yes.
And is there any evidence as to the size of the black economy? I mean, this store of wealth, I mean, how much of that store of wealth would be, from the task force's view, black market activity?
I think it's probably better you ask Treasury and or the task force.
Oh, you raised
itself.
the task force, so I thought you might have had some view on that. But very clearly there's a decision made by some consumers or users of cash, banknotes, that they don't spend it, that they save it.
Yes.
And the implications of this bill are simply, if they have $20,000, they can only spend it in $3,000, $7,000 lots or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Just as long as it's not all in one bill in the end. That'll still nab you for that.
and foreign people holding Australian banknotes, this is an international hedge. I mean, I did read years ago that Japanese consumers, when faced with negative interest rates, would just buy Australian dollars because they seem to be a commodity that might give them a better return than their bank interest rates. Is that still the truth?
Well, Richard will be able to talk about the what we know about shipments of Australian banknotes abroad, for example. But at a slightly broader level, the Australian dollar is actually punches above its weight in terms of its global importance. That it's if we look at all the currencies used in foreign exchange trading, wholesale foreign exchange trading, the Australian dollar is the 5th most traded currency in the world. If we look at the currencies that are held by central banks in their foreign reserve portfolios, the Australian dollar ranks as number 7. We're not the 5th or the 7th largest economy in the world, but the Australian dollar is...
And we're certainly not the 5th or the 7th most complex economy in the world, are we either? No, we're not.
is viewed as a credible currency. So it's not impossible, that's at the wholesale level, so it's not impossible that there could be very significant holdings by individuals offshore, and Richard may be able to tell you a bit about shipments of cash.
But don't you have that $10,000 limit? You can't just take any amount of Australian banknotes out of the country.
Well, I think you have to declare if you take more than $10,000 in or out.
Oh, you can take it, but you have to declare it.
Yeah, there's no prohibition on doing so. And as Tony said, yeah, so the big armoured car companies routinely ship many hundreds of millions of Australian dollars offshore.
Sorry, the big what companies?
Armoured car companies, so Armourguard, Postage, the companies that physically move cash in a safe way.
Got you now.
And so we know how much, essentially we know how much cash flows offshore. A lot of that will come back in tourists' wallets because, they'll go to the Bureau de Change overseas, get cash, then come here and spend it.
But how do we know that that's not being used by a black economy? How do you transact that? I mean, someone puts an order in for 20 million Australian dollars in Taiwan.
Yeah, what if the criminals are exchanging the money overseas and then bringing it back here? Oh, it's tainted money again. Can't have that, guys.
How do you know that that's not black money being used to do that?
So the money that goes offshore is going from bank to bank. So I guess it's at least at the first destination, it's going to a big reputable overseas bank.
Like Westpac.
Westpac might be the Australian bank, and they'll be sending it to Bank of China or JP Morgan or some foreign bank who will then pass it on to their customers.
Hang on, Tom has got an argument for the complexity of our economy. I have an argument that we do have a complex economy, but the overall economy is extra large because of raw minerals. Okay, mate, you have to email that one to me, because I try and order Australian made and I can't find anything in construction.
Okay, so you estimate the remaining 10% or so of issued banknotes are split roughly evenly between banknotes that are lost and banknotes that are used for the shadow economy activities. So can you delve into that a bit? What does that look like?
Yeah.
Monetary terms.
So I guess I should say up front that it's banknotes. It's hard to be definitive about what they're used for because once they leave our vaults, we don't track them, we don't trace them. So to try and understand the shadow economy aspect, we used some data from the ABS, who in 2012, I think, estimated the size of the shadow economy in Australia. The Black Economy Task Force also came up with some estimates, which were, so in their estimate was the ABS numbers times 1.5.
Advanced mathematics there, advanced mathematics there.
So those estimates gave us a sense of the size of the black economy in terms of spending.
All this talk about the black economy, and Lulu makes a really good point here. There's a reason why diamond trade in Hong Kong is so high at the moment.
But then because one banknote can be used multiple times, we had to come up with estimates about how fast cash circulates. So based on those two, given a certain amount of spending and a view on how many times one banknote can be used per year, we estimated that roughly 5% of the amount of spending on shadow economy activities as estimated by the ABS could be facilitated by roughly 5% of the banknotes outstanding.
Sorry, we do have media in the room, so just bring that to your attention. You don't have any objection?
So it's all in, the RBA put this research out, so it's all on the public record. It was put out in late 2018.
Do you have any estimate of...
We're on broadcast.
Does the Reserve Bank, in its purvey, estimate what the shadow economy is and what it looks like?
No. I mean, so we relied on ABS estimates. We've got no expertise in
How does the ABS estimate shadow economy? Does someone volunteer there in the shadow economy and say, put me in that box?
The ABS does lots of good work. That's
That ABS does lots of good work.
So the short answer is I don't know. I think any economic estimate is a hard thing to do.
Yeah.
And notice how ABS are not presenting here. They're not one of the witnesses being called upon. And RBA is just basing the argument on ABS data. And, well, do we all trust the ABS and their data? What about their unemployment rate, guys?
Estimate inflation, estimate GDP. They've got a lot of very skilled statisticians.
I'm just, given the volume of turning this argument on its head, given the volume of transactions by FPOS and tap and go, how does a business exist in the shadow economy? I mean, you literally have to be a stallholder in a marketplace and operating every Saturday and Sunday, and that would be, the only way you could exist outside of the, the legitimate economy, I would have thought.
But don't people, even if they're doing that, you want to claim all your GST credits, how much are they gonna pocket in cash? How many people do you know that do cashies? Rarely. It's so rare these days. It's just a pain in the ass sometimes.
I mean, I've got no personal experience that I could share, but I guess anecdotally, tradespeople could.
Tradespeople. I'm really, because I'll be honest with you guys, I started down an economics degree, and I'm glad I didn't go down that path. I really am.
Take payment and not declare it. Shops. I
can understand that. So tradesman comes around, no receipt required, avoids the GST. Well, they still bought the materials for the job. They still got to run their log.
He made a good point, didn't he? Got to change my earphones, guys, so I can hear what's going on.
Book for their vehicle, they're still got to, put a return in sooner or later, unless they're completely, they're going to go broke anyway. One way or other, they'll get found out. So, I mean, I wouldn't have thought that was a huge... And the incentive really is to get the GST because you can take it off your other side.
This guy's got experience, day to day. Lulu's saying we need to do a Heise says summit dinner. Yeah, I was thinking of an event at the German club. I was thinking of organising it next year. I'll let you all know, guys. Let me know if you're interested in something like that. Be a bit of fun. But yeah, he's a senator speaking common sense.
I mean, there's two sides to the GST, isn't there? So is this a serious problem?
I don't think we can. We have no expertise on
I
how.
think that's probably a question for Treasury. So I think we might. Can we go to Senator Patrick?
Yeah.
Senator Patrick.
Thank you, Chair. I heard in response to an answer that the Chair asked that you do keep track of household expenditure on bank charges. Can you give some details as to what they are?
Yeah, Senator, the figures that I quoted are the merchant service fees paid by all sorts of merchants, retailers and other businesses that accept card payments. So that's the percentage fee in total that Australian merchants and businesses pay to accept card payments. The Reserve Bank also publishes some data on fees, on bank fees. They're published once a year in our bulletin. I don't have those numbers in front of me, but if you had specific questions, we could take them on notice.
Okay, so if you could direct the committee to those, to where we can find that on the web, that would be useful. Just in relation to those merchant fees and indeed bank fees, has the Reserve Bank examined whether or not there is justification in the size of those fees?
The bank has a number of regulations that have impacted the level of card fees paid by merchants. We have some standards or some regulations which cap interchange fees paid between banks, and these fees are set at much lower levels than in many other economies. The bank has also taken regulatory action regarding no surcharge rules, and this has had the effect of bringing down the fees paid by Australian merchants. So I think we have a good understanding of what goes into those fees, and our policy actions have actually exerted a fair bit of downward pressure on them.
Yes, but that's an answer to a different question. You're saying there are regulatory impositions and constraints upon the banks and indeed merchants. My question went to an analysis as to whether or not those fees actually generate income for the companies as opposed to cover off the cost involved in the transaction.
I think I'd probably fall back on my earlier comment that the merchant service fees paid by Australian merchants are significantly lower than in most other countries. So there's every reason to think that it's a reasonably competitive market, and that our policy actions in this respect have been successful. The fact that Australia has got a fairly low-cost payment system.
Okay, can you provide the committee with a comparison, please? The comparison data?
Would be happy to do so.
Okay, but once again, I just reiterate that you're talking about how they compare with perhaps other jurisdictions, as opposed to whether, as I think most Australians would suspect, that the banks and indeed merchants make money from these transactions. And the relevance of that to this inquiry is that this legislation will in fact force people to go to electronic transactions. So my question again goes to, and the answer can be no, but have you conducted analysis, or are you aware of any other government entity that has conducted analysis as to the actual cost of conducting a transaction versus the cost or the charge that is levied on the consumer?
I don't have any specific evidence on that question for the banks, Senator, but as regards any fees charged by merchants, I can comment on that in 2016 there was regulatory reform on merchant surcharges. So where the merchant surcharges a consumer for a particular payment method, say, for example, a particular type of credit card, the merchant may not charge more, pass on an additional cost that is any larger than their cost of acceptance, that costs than they're being charged by their bank. So, for example, as a result of those reforms which the Reserve Bank implemented and which the ACCC was given investigative and enforcement powers, as a result of those reforms, for example, the surcharges charged by the domestic airlines came down very significantly. So I think we can be confident that any surcharges charged by merchants for card acceptance are no more than their cost of acceptance that they have to pay their provider of financial services.
Yeah.
One thing that, I mean, this point is kind of a bit moot, because they were discussing all the types of transactions and how few are actually done in cash anyway. People just accept these charges. And if you really want to avoid it, you pay cash or use FPOS or use another method. So...
Yeah, but then the question goes to, is the provider of those financial services profiting from the fee? So it just transfers the question back up the chain.
Senator, we'll provide you with the data that we have, and that might be able to shed some light on this.
Okay, thank you.
We will need to move on, Senator Patrick.
Okay, can I just ask another quick question?
Yeah, this will have to be the last one.
Okay. You talked about cryptocurrency and perhaps low take-up. Do you have any data that you could provide on notice that shows the take-up of cryptocurrency over perhaps the last 5 years?
There you go, pub.
And indeed, is there any thought that has been applied to the idea that if this legislation were to be enacted, whether or not there would be a drive towards cryptocurrencies, noting it would avoid the sort of scrutiny that is, or the traceability being sort of sought under this legislation?
I'll take your question on any data on notice to see if we can provide anything.
Thank you.
On the question of could there be a shift towards cryptocurrencies, I suppose at the margin, if an entity is currently transacting in cash for nefarious reasons and decides that it's no longer going to use cash, it could potentially shift into cryptocurrency. I note that to get into cryptocurrency, you typically have to get in via a bank transfer. So there's there may be some limits on that. So to get your money either into or out of cryptocurrency, you probably have to go through the domestic banking system. Once it's in cryptocurrency, something like Bitcoin, it's not completely untraceable. It's less traceable than a bank deposit, but it's actually more traceable than cash. So, but I note that the bill defines currency to include cryptocurrency, though the Treasury may be exempting cryptocurrency initially.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Senator Patrick. Will, thank you for your time today. We appreciate it. We will need to move on now to AUSTRAC.
So what do you think, guys, from the Reserve Bank's statements? Come on, hit the like, guys, so we can get that 13 to a lucky number, because we got 58 people viewing. Let's get it a bit higher, because the 13 is not good luck. You know, we need a lucky number, guys. Something with an 8 in there, don't we? So next is AUSTRAC. You think what's most concerning is the fact that the RBA is kind of just taking ABS statistics and then just doubling them. Why isn't the ABS here? Why aren't the organizations that are making these arguments, you know, that are used as the basis for all these decisions, these policies, and these restrictions on our freedom? Why isn't that here? Why aren't the senators provided with all this information? You know? Lulu's going, yep, not even crypto's safe. Well, no, it's not. It's not. So yeah. Oh, let's go. Let's see what AUSTRAC has to say. Pub's going, the Reserve Bank was clear the Cashban wasn't its baby. I mean, they probably see it's pointless, honestly. Considering the number of transactions that are actually done. Oh, Charlie's just joined us. I'm late. What freedoms are we losing this week? We just heard the Reserve Bank give some pretty bad information. Well, pretty much share how little cash is actually used and how little impact this cash ban would have. Essentially, it's completely pointless. So you know what we'll have to do? We'll need to bring in the KPMG lower limit. So guys, let's head on to the next one, AUSTRAC. And we've got Miss Catherine Haig, National Manager of Legal and Policy. Mr. Richard Chin, the National Manager of Intelligence.
How much of that $80 billion do you want? My wife's a hoarder. She got full money to
Do you want me to suspend that? You go on the hand side, you know. I now welcome officials from AUSTRAC. Thank you for appearing before the committee today. I remind officials that the Senators resolve that an officer of a department of the Commonwealth or of a state or territory shall not be asked to give opinions on matters of policy and shall be given a reasonable opportunity to refer questions asked of the officer to superior officers or to a minister. This resolution prohibits only question asking for opinions on matters of policy and does not preclude questions asking for explanations of policies or factual questions about when and how policies were adopted. Our question on notice date is 10th of January. For the Hansard record, could you please state your names and the capacity in which you appear?
Catherine Haig, National Manager, Legal and Policy, AUSTRAC.
And Richard Chin, National Manager of Intelligence Operations at AUSTRAC.
Great. Welcome to you both. And do you care to make some opening remarks?
If it would be helpful to the committee, I'm happy to provide a brief overview of AUSTRAC's roles and functions.
Quickly, as quickly as reasonably possible, then we can
Certainly.
ask you some questions.
So AUSTRAC has a dual function as Australia's anti-money laundering and counter-terrorism financing regulator and financial intelligence unit. That's a dual and interwoven role that's considered to be world's best practice. In our regulatory function, we supervise over 15,000 Australian businesses. We call them reporting entities. They can be broadly categorised groups such as banks and other financial lenders, remitters, bullion dealers, digital currency exchange providers and gambling services. The AML-CTF Act provides a risk-based regime for these entities to identify, mitigate and manage their money laundering obligations. One of the obligations imposed on reporting entities is to report a range of financial transaction information to AUSTRAC, including suspicious matter reports, international funds transaction reports and threshold transaction reports. Moving to our financial intelligence unit function, the FIU function takes that information reported to us by industry, analyses it, interprets it, looks at it alongside information shared with us, provided to us by our partner agencies to generate actionable financial intelligence that we share then back with law enforcement, national security, as well as revenue protection agencies. And we also provide the results of that analysis back to industry, back to our regulated population, so that they in turn can learn from that analysis so that they harden their systems against criminal abuse.
Okay, thank you very much for that. So in terms of that, those 15,000 entities that have obligations to you, do those obligations have a threshold? So amounts above X are what have to be reported? And what is that threshold?
So our reporting population has a range of obligations. They have, as I said, the obligation to identify, mitigate and manage their risk. So it's a risk-based framework, and the onus is on the reporting entity. Parliament's made the decision that they are in the best place to manage their risk. That's the first fundamental obligation they have. They have obligations to know their customer, to maintain records, and of course, as I mentioned, they do, Senator, have the obligation to report various information to us. One of those obligations is to report what we call a threshold, a TTR, a threshold reporting transaction for the physical movement of cash of $10,000 or more.
Okay.
So there you go, guys. We have these systems in place, or this organisation in place. And Thomas makes a good point. You know, the Ministry of Spending, maybe we should call it that, or public consumption. You know.
So, what is the money laundering risk that's caught by the current legislation that is not currently caught by your existing reporting obligations?
Certainly.
Good question there. Here we go. What do you reckon, everyone? Let me know in the comments. How do you think she'll answer it? Will she A, avoid the question? Will she B, say, we can't really identify it? Will it be hearsay or anecdotal evidence, or are we going to hear about the tradies, guys? Let me know. Come on, here we go. Turbine is saying the tradies. Hairdressers? It's going to be the hairdressers or the personal traders? Or personal trainers? Okay. It'll be A. Crunchy reckons it's the traders. Kathy thinks it's the hairdressers. Oh, I know my mother who does, she's a hairdresser. Ironically, you can tell both my father and I were bald exactly like this. And Charlie thinks it's going to be blamed on, Pub thinks it'll be Western white men. Oh, no, Pub thinks she'll be a non-answer. Charlie thinks it'll be Western white men. And Golden Shekels is going with a Liberal Party membership. Or a Victorian Labor Party, I can't tell anymore. Okay, here we go.
AUSTRAC considers that the cash payment limit is a very useful measure that will help address a money laundering risk to the economy that is not currently covered by the AML-CTF Act. It's about targeting the money laundering risk associated with cash. Cash is globally recognised as imposing an inherently high risk for money laundering. Cash transactions, as I'm sure you would appreciate, are anonymous. The money can be readily exchanged and is often untraceable.
That's the whole point of money, isn't
it?
Yes. But we've just heard before how few transactions actually happen above this $10,000 threshold. And sometimes you need to accept, in a civilization, to have certain freedoms, you need to accept some of this loss. It's just part of the way you go.
It's in the context of, AUSTRAC's done some analysis around this, and it's in the context generally of how it's used in connection with high value goods, which are attractive to criminals wishing to launder money, that we see that there are benefits in the cash payment limit in helping address a money laundering risk to the Australian economy.
How is this going to stop someone who is intentionally wanting to launder money. If you were selling something and someone says, okay, I'll pay you, you know, I'll buy this car off you for 20 grand. You take cash, I'll pay you 25. What do you think would happen?
Okay. So what are the attributes of the transactions that are hoped to be caught by this that make them a money laundering risk in the economy that aren't caught by any other mechanism?
So he's just asked the same question again because she didn't answer it, didn't she?
So we don't currently regulate the transactions by high-value dealers. We don't, if someone is purchasing or selling a high-value good such as jewellery, art, antiquities, luxury cars, that would not be something that they would be required, by using cash, not be required to report to AUSTRAC.
Okay. So do we have any idea of the scale of that issue? Or is that more a question
that
for
would be
Treasury
more a
ATO?
question for Treasury.
Okay.
So many departments that are making, she's making all these claims and she doesn't even have the information herself. I guess they're bureaucrats, aren't they? I keep thinking of Yes Minister. Pub reckons she's bitter that we don't have to report cash. And Charlie's going, what's the bet? Old mate doesn't bring up the donations from Chinese people towards Liberal Labor Greens. Oh, they've already made fun of that yesterday. I think they were paying out the Labor guys. Aldi bags were mentioned a few times, guys. They were mentioned in yesterday's live stream.
Senator Gallagher.
Okay. Can I go to the issue that's intriguing me is the Australians love to have a bet, and there's billions of dollars to get bet every week or every day. What are the requirements of, you know, the major betting organisations? What are they required to notify to you?
So their obligations are the same as for any other of our reporting entities. So they would be required to report to us the TTR transactions, suspicious...
What's a CTR transaction?
The threshold transaction report.
$10,000.
The $10,000 movement of physical
Nothing
currency.
else?
Two other types of reporting transactions: international funds transfer instructions, if that was to occur through that type of service, or we find more frequently what we call suspicious matter reports. That's an obligation on all of our reporting entities, not particular to the gaming industry, whereby if they suspect or reasonably suspect a transaction relates to a crime or a potential crime under Australian law, they are obliged to report that to AUSTRAC.
So if someone goes down to the betting shop on Saturday with $300 and turns it into $12,000, you'll get a report on that. What will you get? Will you get the person's name and address? Or?
Our rules provide extensive details about the information that is to be provided in a threshold transaction report, a range of details about the transaction, the payer's name, where the money is being moved to. There is a long list of...
Well, they just take it out, you know, they do something miraculous and turn $300 into $12,000. Are they required to leave their name, address and...
If there's a...
So there you go, guys. Every time you're taking out that $10,000 from the bank and they ask you what you're doing, that gets reported. So when you make your smart-ass comments to the bank, it goes to AUSTRAC. Just like I tried to file something at the court and made smart-ass comments about bikies. I'm sure that went somewhere.
If there's a threshold transaction reporting obligation triggered, they have to provide their date of birth, their name, residential address, postal address, business address, details of any signatories to the account, the purpose of the transfer, and the amount of the transfer.
Okay, so...
Bloody hell. Bloody hell. Oh, well, yeah, there you go. There you go. Look how much we're monitored already. Look how much we are monitored already. You know? Rob's going, yeah, it won't be long till you have to make a DNA sample as well. Here you go. Crunchy's going, she isn't answering the questions. Bloody hell. I bet you Stalin would have loved the technology we have these days. He would have loved it. Shouldn't have said that. Now, all my videos, this video will be demonetized, saying the S word.
You've got all that pretty well covered off. What is the gap that this legislation is trying to fill?
That it doesn't apply, Senator Gallagher, to amounts under that $10,000. That's an area where it's a...
They want to report smaller amounts. How much is this going to cost these businesses? Here we go. Pub's telling us he used to manage that monitoring system, and it's worse than people think. Just think about this. How much of a pain in the ass does everyone have to do with their BAS? Could you imagine if... Oh, boy. What if it's every $2,000? Like KPMG, every $2,000 transaction, every business with an ABN has to report it to AUSTRAC. I'm sure they'll make a nice website where you can do that. Bloody paperwork. This is not innovation. This is a complete dead weight to the economy. I bet you this entire department could be automated, and you could have computers analyzing the transactions to find anything that is suspicious, and then you could assess it. But you still need people typing it in at the front end. And that's going to affect the private sector.
Cash transaction that AUSTRAC does not regulate. Okay. So we welcome the cash payment limit as a measure that complements the AML CTF regime by targeting an area where there are known money laundering risks that we don't have the legislative remit to regulate.
Okay.
She wants more power. The organisation wants more power and more controls. What do you reckon, guys? What do you think about that one? I wouldn't even like her as my boss, let alone someone in charge of this much.
So you may have heard the Reserve Bank's evidence earlier where there's $80 billion worth of cash in circulation, and only 25% of that cash is used for buying and selling stuff. The rest is used to store value. So the effect of this law would be that those people who have stored value in cash would now be restricted in how they spend that.
So no, I think that's probably a policy issue.
That's a fact though, isn't it? Well, if they spent $11,000, you'd be notified where you didn't get notified before.
That's correct.
But are you saying there's an inherent risk there with people who've stored their money in cash, that all of a sudden that you need to be told when they're spending their $20,000 they got under the bed?
I figured it out, guys. They probably get paid per transaction they assess. That's it. That's how these bureaucrats are getting paid. So they need to have more data. They need to have more information, more control. What do you reckon? Do you think I'm on the money there, or am I going a bit crazy?
When under this we wouldn't be told. It's another way of dealing with transactions of the...
But your system's already been proven to not be effective, as we've seen with Westpac. And this isn't as big a problem as we think, if only a quarter of the 80 billion. That's less than the apparent concern, you know. Remember the Black Economy Task Force, how much of a dead weight it's on the economy.
High value, because they're focusing on entities that we don't regulate. That's the point of distinction. We see it as a complementary mechanism of reducing Australia's overarching money laundering risk.
Okay, so how many transactions are you notified per annum now?
For threshold transaction reports, last financial year we received 2.6 million transactions.
And in the new environment with this new law, would you see more or less?
Well, if...
Because you're already at 10,000, aren't you?
We're at 10,000,
so
yes.
what would this new law do for your reporting?
So what we would expect to see, Senator, is that if people want to make transactions in that cash of that amount, they will then be moved into the regulated financial system. And there will be a report through to AUSTRAC.
So have you assessed how many payments that are over 10,000 in cash now are going on, and how many are you likely to see? Have you done any scoping there? You're going to need to double the size of your workforce to count them all, or what?
Well, we already receive a large number of those.
You get
threshold
2.6 million, so once this law's enacted, are you going to get 5 million transactions?
If they are made in cash, Senator, but there may be other ways that those payments are made that don't generate the threshold transaction reporting obligation, which only applies to cash transactions. So those
bear with me. So 10,000, I'd pay $11,000 in cash now, and it's completely legal. No problem. After the enactment of this bill, that will have to be, if it's to an ABN holder, that'll have to be done electronically, or it will be illegal. Is that right?
That's my understanding, Senator.
Okay, so how many more transactions are you going to see? Has anybody done the snapshot of that?
That would be a question I would have to take on notice, Senator.
Well, perhaps if you could, because if you do 2.6 million, we want to know what is the size of this problem you're trying to solve.
In terms of the size of the problem, I think that's a question best directed to Treasury.
But you're going to count the problem when it's enacted. It's going to all come back to you, isn't it? Because if it goes back through the regulated system, you'll get notification of $11,000.
That's correct, yes.
But you don't have any idea how much you're going to be doing in a year after this legislation?
Not specifically, but we regularly manage fluctuations in our reporting.
Okay. So did the Black Economy Task Force attempt to guesstimate how much increased work AUSTRAC and other entities who do this reporting we're going to see?
Senator, I'd have to take that on notice.
So you don't know?
You can ask them. Next.
Yeah. Well, I mean, AUSTRAC's, it's a reporting agency.
I'm liking him more and more the more of this we watch, guys. What do you reckon? I mean, it just shows you these bureaucrats, doesn't it? It just shows you these bureaucrats.
You count transactions, that's what you do, isn't it?
That's part of what we do, yes.
Essentially, at your base level, you count transactions over $10,000, and a lot of those will be...
Crunchy, Treasury is up next, mate. They're coming, and I can't actually go back and relook at it. You know? Kathy thinks her whole body language is screaming discomfort and deception. I think she's just got... I just think she's got no idea. Just a bureaucrat. You know? That'd be a different world, wouldn't it, being in that environment? You'd have to be on edge all the time. You couldn't, you know? Be careful with everything you say to everyone. Heise says, get an interview with the senator. Pub's asking me. Okay, we should invite him on. He used to say thank you. Or should chip in and send him a carton. You know?
Completely innocuous transactions. So I paid a bill the other day for a concrete pour. You would have got notified of that because it was more than $10,000. But
that's what he sent his wife to get the bank check for. See, it's all coming out now. It's all coming out now. So it's a driveway. It's 20 grand. So yeah, I bet you it's a driveway. What do you reckon?
What interest is that to you? That would just go straight through to the keeper somehow, wouldn't it?
We're watching you, mate. Look at her. We're watching him. We got you, Senator.
Wouldn't it?
We're notified where they're over $10,000, yes. Yes, but
a lot of those transactions are just business doing business. Do you not have to, don't you dig down into that data and say what is of interest to us?
Yes, then getting that it helps provide a baseline so that our intelligence analysts can see when there's variations or inactivity that might be suggestive of
what percentage of your 2.6 million are in the intelligence interest area?
All of them, I would say, but I might defer to my colleague Richard Chin.
Yeah, Senator, sadly you're correct in the sense that a reasonable proportion, and what that proportion is, we can't say definitively.
Can you take that on notice?
Yeah, absolutely. But I think to your point, we have to combine that information with a lot of other information that we receive, including the suspicious matter reporting from our regulated entities, as well as our work with law enforcement and other agencies to give context to those transactions, and that's where the value really is.
Do you use algorithms to sort out? I mean, there must be any number of companies that pay their wages bill every month, and it's more than $10,000. You get notified, but you don't spend any time on that, do you?
Yeah, absolutely. We use algorithms. We have a considerable investment in
So you should have some idea through the use of algorithm what looks like a transaction you're interested in.
Thomas is just going, so the one time you buy a driveway in 10 years, it counts as an unusual transaction. Yep. When you go to the bank and take a whole chunk of money out too. There you go. Scored it twice. When you take the money out, when you put it in.
One which is not just normal business.
Yes,
what I'm
absolutely.
after is what's the future going to look like?
Yeah. That's certainly a continuing part of our future with an increasing amount of transactions. I mean, overall, we receive, in the order of 160 million transaction reports. So we do need to combine that with other sources.
So I'm getting a little confused now. So what's the 160 million versus the 2.5 million?
The 160, it's actually 158 million reports over 2018-19, which combines suspicious matter reporting, the threshold transaction reporting that Catherine referred to.
So the 160 odd is the total. The 2.5 is the suspicious.
The 2.5 is the threshold transaction reports for cash.
Ah, okay.
Yes.
And
So that's
so
someone
on
taking
notice,
money
can you
out of
tell
the
us then what percentage are considered, what percentage do you red flag or however? You must then analyse a percentage of those as suspicious transactions. So can you give us some sense of that or take that on notice?
We'll have to take that on notice, and it is informed by the context from other sources of data. And also noting that money laundering is sometimes is perpetuated in a way where it is deliberately set up to look innocuous on occasion. So we need to be able to work out where that is.
So just finally for me then, the 2.6 transactions, is that people going to their bank and taking out $15,000? Or is that going to your bank and putting in $15,000?
It's both.
That's what it is? Because it doesn't get a nod, doesn't get on Hansard.
Yes.
Yes, it's both.
So that's just simple transactions which the bank report where cash moved across their account are either in or out over 10,000.
Yes.
2.6 million.
That's
and
right.
160 million was business doing business. Like, people paying wages, buying things.
Well, I don't think at this stage we can provide you with a further breakdown of exactly what that 2.6 million was.
You think they would have easy access to that information, wouldn't you? You think that would be an important part of their reporting? I was right, they don't know.
We will take that on notice and provide some more information about how we use that information with the rest of our holdings to give you some figures around the financial intelligence reports that are generated as a result, if that would be helpful, Senator.
Okay. And if you could just, surely you would have done an analysis of the effect of the bill on your organisation. Is it going to give you more work or less work?
Data management is an ongoing challenge for the agency, and it's something that we're constantly looking at.
You smell something fishy, Crunchy? I just see incompetent bureaucrats or people that are being challenged that probably haven't been. What do you reckon? These people aren't in a private sector where they have to report to a boss that has, they don't need to meet certain requirements. It's a different world inside the public service. It's crazy. It is insane. I've done a stint in there. I couldn't handle it. Some people do so little work. You would be shocked. You would be shocked. And they're so entitled. It is just insane.
Thanks, Chair.
Senator Patrick.
Thank you, Chair. My first question is, noting we hold these inquiries to work out whether to pass, amend or reject legislation, and you would appear to be one of the beneficiaries of this particular legislation. Why did Austrac not make a submission to this inquiry, and who made that decision?
Ah, good on you, Rex. Good question. What do you reckon, guys? Let's have another survey, another poll. You think it's because A, they didn't know there were submissions, B, they couldn't work the word processor, or C, they had too much data that they couldn't get to it? Which one do you reckon, guys? Let me know in the comments. While I have a shot of coffee. Oh, sorry, yep. And D, question on notice. We can't tell you. Okay, yeah. Yep. What do you reckon? Come on, guys. It's more fun if you answer. They didn't watch the CBC in time to know what was happening. Lulu thinks D. I think everyone thinks D. Tom thinks they didn't watch. You mean CBC or CEC? Hamish thinks D as well. So I'm thinking D. Question on notice. Okay.
Senator, Austrac didn't make a submission to the inquiry on the basis that we were a member of the Black Economy Task Force throughout the process, and as part of those recommendations, Austrac is exempt. Austrac's reporting entities are exempt from the application of the cash payments limits. Our views on the cash payment limit were taken into account during the Black Economy Task Force process, and we engage regularly with Treasury throughout the development of this bill.
Respectfully, that doesn't answer my question. We're trying to understand the benefits of this particular legislation. You are, in fact, the person or the entity that would receive this information, and you don't feel it necessary to describe to the Senate exactly how you might use this information to allow us to read in advance of you appearing as to how you can how you intend to benefit from this, such that we're not bogged down asking the sorts of questions, the very good questions that Senator Gallagher was asking. Who made that decision not to submit?
Senator, I'd have to take that on notice.
There you go, D. D. And everyone likes Senator Rex. Yes, burn, baby, burn. Look at that. See the fires come up on my comment thing, guys? There you go. So D.
And can I also ask you to perhaps reconsider that? Because there are other people, other entities that read Senate submissions, and that helps them inform them in respect of their evidence that they give to committees as well.
Certainly, Senator, we can revisit that decision. And if I could if I may just make one observation, Austrac certainly doesn't consider itself to be a beneficiary in terms of this legislation. We see this as having benefits for the Australian economy at large by being another way in which the money laundering risk can be reduced.
Yeah, but we're trying to understand how it's used, and so maybe I'll go to the line of questioning that flows from your statements. I think you said in your opening that there are 15,000 reporting entities. Is that correct?
Yes, Senator.
Okay, so if this legislation is introduced, does that mean that the number of reporting entities will increase? For example, merchants would now fall under the banner of reporting entities.
This is a good question. This is what worries me even more than anything. Is this going to be like another piece of paperwork everyone has to do every bloody month?
Senator, the number of reporting entities would not increase as a result of the introduction of this bill.
So what you're saying is a merchant will conduct a transaction, for concrete, as Senator Gallagher suggested, and that simply goes to a bank, and the bank then reports the information. Is that how it works?
Yes, in general terms, yes, Senator, that's correct.
And so then how do you identify, as Senator Gallagher was suggesting, that something is unusual or, out of order?
Senator, I think the point is that the cash that would have been used for that transaction would need to go into the regulated system, so there would be some form of visibility.
People would just do it. Is that what he's saying?
At a particular point around that cash.
If people are already doing the dodge, why the hell would this stop them?
Yeah, but the point of visibility is so you can do something with it. So the question is, what are you going to do with it?
So, Senator, what we do with threshold transactions is they're part of all the information we gather from all of our reporting entities to help us identify persons that might be engaged in potentially suspicious activity. And what we do is we apply a range of data analysis techniques, including algorithms, to allow us to look for links between the information provided in those threshold transaction reports with the other information that we hold, such as the suspicious matter reports and other information that's been provided to us by partner agencies. And by joining those pieces of the puzzle together, we generate actionable financial intelligence that we share with our law enforcement partners and others. In a nutshell, that is the process.
Okay. In relation to cryptocurrency, we heard from Treasury that you do in fact have some visibility to cryptocurrencies. Can you please provide the committee with some information in relation to that? What visibility do you have over cryptocurrency transactions?
Thank you, Senator. AUSTRAC does not regulate digital currency itself. What we have done since April 2018 is we regulate the digital currency exchanges. The purpose of enabling us to do that is so that we can minimise the use of criminals of those exchanges for money laundering, terrorism financing and other serious crimes. So what we are regulating is businesses that exchange physical currency, fiat currency, into digital currency.
One thing, Innocent, when they mean intelligence, they don't mean in their team. An example would be, say, if they've identified potential terrorists and family members of those terrorists may be shorting an airline or a particular business, and that could indicate there's a potential attack going to happen associated with that. That would be how you would make the links, and that's what they've done ever since 9/11. They've started using that intelligence. I'm not saying AUSTRAC has, but other organisations have. That's the type of linking they're trying to make. So yeah, but I agree with you.
Businesses are required to register and enrol with AUSTRAC, adopt a program to identify, mitigate and manage their risks, to report suspicious matters to AUSTRAC, and to keep records and understand their customers.
So that's for the law-abiding businesses, which this bill is not particularly targeting. The unlawful players in this, people that are conducting, sort of illicit activities. Presumably, if they're prepared to engage in unlawful activity, that they're probably prepared to not register in respect of the sort of regime you just described. Yep. As a result of this bill, I presume if it sends people into the digital cryptocurrency domain, will we find ourselves in a situation where all we do is drive criminals to another place that you don't have much visibility over?
I suppose displacement is always a risk, Senator, but We currently have 306 registered digital currency exchange providers, and the committee might be interested to know that as at the 31st of August, AUSTRAC had refused 3 registrations and cancelled 3. So it is an area that we work closely with the digital currency exchanges to make sure they are being run by entities that take their obligations under the AML-CTF Act seriously.
Sorry, did you say 360 or 306?
306.
Okay, and could you provide the committee on notice the rate of increase in the number of registrations, or are you only saying it only started back last year?
Yes, in April, we became responsible for this in April 2018, and in that time, as at the 30th of November, there were 306 digital currency exchange providers registered with us.
And can I just jump in there, Senator Patrick? So,
Yep.
do you track the total volume of exchanges, like the value of exchanges? So, do we know how much money is going through each of those exchange?
I will take that on notice. I would say the answer is no, because we don't regulate the currency, but I can clarify that with my colleagues and provide you with a definitive answer.
Would anyone, apart from you, be...
Coin market cap, mate. You can find it there. Find it on your phone.
Senator, you're touching on a challenge that the international money laundering community is grappling with at the moment. There's an international body called the Financial Action Task Force, FATF, and they are currently working with member countries like Australia to develop a new set of standards to address some of these challenges, so that in the way we currently do with, say, IFTI transactions, we will know who is at either end of the transaction. It won't necessarily address the volume of the transaction, but it will give us a line of sight about where the currency is being sent and by whom.
Okay. Senator Patrick?
Yes, thank you, and thank you, Chair. And I just wonder whether or not anything can be drawn from perhaps the initial uptake in August last year versus continuing registration. The Chair's probably going to pull me up statistically on this, but where I'm trying to get to is how what's our understanding of the uptake of cryptocurrencies within the Australian economy?
I can't speak to the uptake of the currency, although I do note that the Reserve Bank did touch on that point. And
all right. I wonder if you could perhaps on notice provide the committee with any understanding, any thoughts that AUSTRAC may have, noting your limited visibility and the registration activities that you have. But sort of that question that I raised about whether or not this bill will drive people into the cryptocurrency space, and if indeed that were to occur, whether or not you would be able to deal with it effectively.
yes, certainly, Senator, we can do that.
Okay. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Can I just go to the, I mean, it's not relevant to this inquiry, but the high-profile case of Westpac. So you're a tracker of money? Essentially, that's true, isn't it?
Reporting entities are required to report certain transactions to us.
So in that case, they didn't report to you?
Senator, we make an allegation of failure to report, but given that the matter's before the court, I would prefer not to take it any further than that.
Well, it's also in the court of public opinion, and Westpac are not doing too well in that respect. But so are you a proactive agency, or are you just a repository of millions of transactions which someone who eventually has a suspicion about someone's activity comes and mines that activity for evidence?
I wonder how she's going to answer this one. Guys, I wonder how she's going to answer this one.
We are absolutely a proactive agency. We work in a range.
So how long did the Westpac thing take to go to fruition?
Senator, I do not feel comfortable answering
Was it
questions.
5 years or 10 years?
Senator, this is a matter before the court. I really do not feel comfortable answering those
Yeah,
questions.
you may not feel comfortable, but if it's been going on for 10 years, how comfortable can we be in the way that you characterise the information that you've got? That's my point. I don't care about Westpac and Austrac, but if you're going to get additional millions of transactions and you have no idea how many you're going to get, I'm just looking for the evidence that you know what you're going to do with them when you get them, because, you know, I could make an allegation that you might have been asleep on the job.
That's good. I like that one. There we go. There we go. Yeah, burn, people. This is priceless. Calling a spade a spade. You're right, David. He's doing that. He's doing that. Heise, did you look at her reaction? Well, it's on the screen right now, mate. Bureaucrats. I need to look up this this Labor senator, see what his background is. Okay.
I'm not going to speak to the specifics of Westpac whatsoever. I think Austrac's track record shows that we have, over the course of recently, have acquired a very strong and proactive compliance and regulatory posture that has achieved significant deterrence effect throughout our reporting population.
It just didn't permeate to all 4 of our big banks, that's all.
I mean, that shows you a huge failing in their organisation, doesn't it? Why is anyone at Austrac going to be fired, guys? I wonder.
I'm sorry, Senator, I didn't catch that comment.
It just didn't permeate to all 4 of our large banks. One decided to do something different. So when this new regime comes in, what, and I think your evidence is you don't know how many additional transactions you're going to get.
Yes, I've indicated we will take that on notice.
Right. And what I'm trying to get to is, what do you do with those transactions, given that they'll be probably from millions of individuals? What possibly could you do with them?
So to go back to, I can reiterate how we use that threshold transaction reporting information, in that it is information that is very valuable to Austrac. It is information that goes into the mix of a range of other holdings that we have, including suspicious matter transaction reports. We mine that information, we data match that information to help us and our partner agencies identify threats of money laundering, terrorism financing, and serious organised crime to the Australian community. We then share that information with our law enforcement intelligence partners, including revenue collection agencies, so they can take steps to address it.
You do that now, though, don't you?
We absolutely do that now.
So this new law will just make the pool of information you get bigger.
That's correct.
But it may not make the pool of transgressors bigger. It may just put more ordinary Australians in a review process which is completely unnecessary.
Yeah, I'm liking Gallagher. He's doing a good job. He's doing a good job.
Which probably logically would be correct.
And Senator, and what it will also do, though, and why we think it is positive in terms of reducing the money laundering risk, is it will force criminals who are currently using cash, laundering their illegal activities through cash transactions, to use the regulated financial system.
Bullshit. Bullshit.
and it will increase the opportunity for those illicit transactions and the associated predicate offences to be detected and then disrupted by law enforcement.
Okay, we'll have...
We've got 2 minutes, 2:30
No,
we finish
Senator
this.
Patrick's asked for a final question. So
I'll give, but just so I'm just not sold on this, because if a criminal is a criminal and they want to seek to avoid the rules, why wouldn't they just operate completely outside the rules? Why are you saying it's going to drive a criminal into the rules? So just...
Yeah, this is a really easy... Is it because these bureaucrats are separate from the real world? Is that why what we're seeing here, guys?
Just go and pay cash for cash with someone who's prepared to take the cash.
Criminals will always look for ways to avoid...
But this is turning normal people into criminals.
compliance. What AUSTRAC does is we work with reporting entities so that their systems are at less risk of being exploited by criminal syndicates.
Senator Patrick.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And this just a simple question goes supplementary in relation to Westpac. It's just a very simple question as to detection, if you like. Was it AUSTRAC that identified the problematic transactions and were proactive about it, or was it Westpac that self-reported?
Senator, again, this matters before the court. If you wish to find out...
It's before the federal court and it's not before a jury, and indeed that's just a question of fact.
Senator, I would encourage you to read the concise statement if you would like to find out more information about the Westpac matter, and I would be very happy to talk to you about the Westpac matter further outside of the committee proceedings, noting that the matter is before the court.
And
Okay,
given
sorry?
Senator Patrick, given it doesn't have a direct bearing on this bill...
Well, it does in the context, Chair, respectfully, that if you've got an organisation that is collecting data and is unable to see something, why give them more data? I think that was the sort of line of questioning that Senator Gallagher was going. And it's just a simple question. Who did AUSTRAC, in receipt of all this information, detect the Westpac indiscretions, alleged indiscretions, if you like, or was it Westpac that self-reported?
We don't consider it necessarily to be a straightforward matter. The matter is before the court. And Senator, I am happy to discuss this further with you in a different forum.
I'll take you up on that offer. Thank you.
All right, we will need to move on. Thank you very much for appearing before the committee today. Now we will suspend briefly while we change over to Treasury and ATO. I understand they are outside, so do you want to break, Alex, or do you just want to keep going? No, we'll just suspend briefly and keep going.
Well, there you go, guys. What do you think about that? I think Thomas made a good point here. This will mean normal people have to burn money in courts for years to prove their innocence. Yep, that's exactly it. And we're seeing that with everything else. We're seeing that with all the anti-discrimination laws. We're seeing that with all the hate speech laws. All of that just costs you money. You've got to prove your innocence. So, guys, how long have we been going? 1 hour and 45 minutes. So I'm getting pretty tired, guys. I'm thinking maybe we go for, because next is Treasury and the Australian Taxation Office. They're the next ones. What do you think? You want to keep going or take a break? Or get back to it tomorrow, guys? Let me know in the comments. Yeah, we got 87 people viewing, so hit the likes, guys. Let's try and get that equal to the number of viewers that we have.
We will resume this hearing. I now welcome officials from Treasury and the Australian Taxation Office. Thank you for...
So, okay, I think I'm going to go and get a cup of water, guys, and then I'll come back. Or you want to do it tomorrow? Keep going, keep going. Kathy wants to do it tomorrow. Keep going, keep going. Jupe Keck, this is riveting. Okay, I'm going to go fill up my stein, and then I'll come back and we'll keep going, guys. Because I've got we're doing photos tomorrow afternoon, so I probably can't do a live stream then. Okay, let me go get a drink and I'll be back. 1 sec. Okay, guys, I'm back. And Rachel's going to put some washing on the dryer, guys, because we've had some storms here today. So you may hear that in the background. I doubt it, but if you do, you will. And it's just going to be something we'll have to put up with. We ready to get going? What do you reckon about Austrac's responses? A lot on notice, you know? A lot on notice, guys. But I think the senators made some good points, and I think it's good. It's good that the senators are asking these questions. You know? Okay, Lulu's got a popcorn. Fantastic. Good. Okay, guys. Cheers. Crunchy's thinking Austrac just wants more power. Yeah, I think you're right. Okay, here we go.
Appearing before the committee today. I remind officials that the Senate has resolved that an officer of the Department of the Commonwealth or of a state or territory shall not be asked to give opinions on matters of policy and shall be given reasonable opportunity to refer questions asked of the officer to superior officers or to a minister. This resolution prohibits only questions asking for opinions on matters of policy and does not preclude questions asking for explanations of policies or factual questions about when and how policies were adopted. Questions on notice are due on the 10th of January. For the Hansard record, could you please state your name and the capacity in which you appear? Who wants to start?
I can start. Chris Leggett, Principal Advisor, Law Design Office at the Treasury.
Patrick Bonham, Division Head of the Black Economy Division, Treasury.
Michael Hardy, Assistant Commissioner with the Australian Taxation Office.
Peter Holt, Assistant Commissioner, Australian Taxation Office.
Welcome to you all.
Ooh, so we got a few more. Hang on. I'll make that a bit smaller so we can see who all these people are. There we go.
Organisations wish to make any opening remarks?
We're happy to go straight to questions.
Happy to go straight to questions, thanks, Senator.
Okay then.
Happy to go straight to questions, okay.
I guess I'll kick off. In terms of the Black Economy Task Force, obviously we've got the report here. It was a pretty significant report with a lot of recommendations. Where are we at in terms of working our way through the Black Economy Task Force report, and where does this particular piece of legislation fit within the overall scope of those recommendations?
Thank you, Senator. I think it's important to note that the Black Economy report is a whole of government report. It's up about 80 recommendations were made within that report, covering things from tax evasion, and the Black Economy Task Force was very wanted to ensure that the black economy was not just seen as tax evasion, that it had a much broader impact on society. So they looked at issues such as welfare fraud, digital identity, employee entitlements. So that it was quite...
So none of those things are going to be affected by this.
Broad in relation, legal gambling was another one as well. The government has, I think, moved on about 20 so far. It got announced in budget last year, so within about 16 months, 22 have been done. And they made a commitment to do around 56 of those recommendations. The The government didn't agree to about 3 of them and noted a number of them as well. So there's been quite a significant progress done in relation to the Black Economy Task Force. In relation to this particular recommendation, it is just one part of that whole of government strategy. It targets a specific part of the black economy, and I think the witness from United Church said it's not a panacea for all the black economy activity.
Oh, look at that. They're talking to the witness from the Uniting Church. Funny that. Hey. Funny that indeed, guy. Wonder why.
It is very selective and targeted. And that is the issues around pretty egregious tax evasion, but also money laundering, which is falling out the gap from the AUSTRAC processes. The issue with this one is the black economy was basically, and a lot of the recommendations from that came from evidence from which Michael Andrew and his secretariat found while going and speaking to the communities, business organisations and other public sector agencies. And what that found was that there was a growing frustration from businesses that other businesses were using cash discounts to cut them out. So it was a competition issue. So for Michael, it was a fairness issue. So it was fairness above tax evasion in his mind. So he didn't think it was fair that some businesses were putting money into their business and not being able to compete on the basis because some other business wasn't prepared to meet their obligations. So he didn't want a situation where a business had to actually compete by breaking the law. So he came up with the $10,000 one. He also heard stories about, and he passed these on to me, of a car dealership being...
So is this all based on anecdotal stories and interviews? I need to go through this this report. I'll do a video on it, guys. But do we want these type of things limiting our freedoms? Is this how our government is making decisions based on stuff like this? Wow.
Offered $1.5 million in cash for 10 cars. The car dealer took it, but when they traced it back, it was found to be an organised gang. But the car dealer had no option to say yes or no to that. They took it.
Are you going to say no to an organised gang anyway, even if you know it's dodgy money?
They probably thought it was suspect. However, there's no way in which they know that. So from Michael's point of view, he saw that as a gap in the existing legislation. So that's the purpose of this particular provision. The task force didn't want to disrupt day-to-day transactions. That's the reason for the high level, so the 10,000 amount. And the 10,000 amount was also set as so it could complement the AML CTF law as well.
So one of the potential issues that arise from this, and I'll make this up as an example. A coffee shop which does deal in a lot of cash goes regularly to a supplier and buys their beans over the course of a month or two. They rack up over 10,000, though no individual transaction is worth more than 4. They decided, for practicality's sake, because they do have a lot of cash on hand, to use cash. Will that get caught by this legislation?
Only if the specific transaction is $10,000 or more. So
but cumulatively, it will be?
It's not a cumulative threshold.
See, that's different to what we read in the legislation, isn't it? And to the stuff from Treasury. If you have all of these orders every week, and you pay a bit cash, by end of the month and it's over 10 grand, you'll get caught.
But if they paid 5,000 and 5,000, it's not.
That would be okay.
So it's got to be a single transaction.
Single transaction above
over
$10,000 or more.
Do you remember did he read what Treasury put out? Does anyone else remember that?
So Do we have any idea, both in terms of stocks and flows, how much cash is being used for illegal transactions? I mean, the figure of, I think, 3.3 billion is bandied around at times, but I think that's more than just cash. So do we have any idea of the scope of the issue that we're addressing here?
It's very hard because by its nature it's hidden. And once the cash is in the legitimate economy, it's very difficult to then distinguish what its source was. And I think that is one of the reasons why they wanted to target this amount in relation to people who are sort of money laundering their ill-gotten gains. The RBA did mention that I think they have an estimate of about 4 to 8% of cash on hand is used for shadow economy, black economy purposes. So at about 80%, you're looking somewhere around 6.5, up maximum about 6.5 billion.
Okay, and the 10,000, I think you probably covered this, but it's why was that number picked rather than 20 or 5?
One, it was to complement the AML, so the money laundering and counter-terrorism financing legislation. Michael thought there was a gap. The AML CTF is not economy-wide. It is mainly related to financial institutions, gambling, bullion dealers and remittance dealers. So it's not a comprehensive regime. So there are things which you can do outside of that regime to launder money. There has been calls to expand that regime to include real estate agents, lawyers, accountants. But at the moment, the legislation only applies to those which currently are affected by the law. So from that point of view, it sort of made sense to Michael and the task force to set it at $10,000, because that's where you would start to suspect more suspicious transactions starting to occur in the economy. The other thing, what I mentioned before, is they didn't want it set at a lower level to affect day-to-day transactions.
That's not what KPMG said in their submission, is it? They were arguing for it down to $2,000.
So they really wanted to target it. It's a targeted measure. It's not as low as it is in European Union countries. I think the lowest there is about 1,000 euros. But they have a different purpose than what this law is for. They were basically trying to target terrorism offences.
I just need to draw attention to what Thomas has said here. You know, if you're intimidated into taking cash and then potentially blackmailed, it's a good point.
And what they found is that terrorism offences are pretty low value. So hiring, purchasing guns, hiring vans, etc. So they have a much lower threshold than what we do.
So in terms of your consultation,
yes,
have you talked to those businesses who still have, the potential at least to have, reasonable amounts of transactions in cash? I'm assuming that it would probably still be things like the restaurant trade, perhaps used car sales, the hospitality industry in general. Did you talk directly with those industry participants, and what feedback did you get from them?
So we mainly targeted what we saw as high value businesses, high value goods businesses. So the restaurant trade, it's highly unlikely they're probably doing a $10,000 sale. It's not out of the ordinary.
I'm thinking more that they'd be dealing with suppliers,
suppliers
with a lot of cash.
So we actually have an advisory board, and we have the head of the Restaurant and Caterers Association on that, and he hasn't made any comment about that. I haven't specifically asked him though. We've spoken to the Motor Traders Association. They generally think that a lot of their members actually don't deal in cash. There's concerns of taking large amounts of cash, in that you could have employee theft, you could have just general theft. You've got the cost of actually counting, moving it to a bank. So there are costs in relation to having large amounts of cash on your premises. We also spoke to the Jewellers Association. They, again, don't think a lot of their memberships actually accept cash at such high values. And we've also spoken to Flight Centre, and they've raised some issues around mainly around the start date, that they would need time to adjust to a cash limit.
Okay. How do exemptions work under the legislation? Are there any, and what is there a process by which an industry could ask for an exemption?
So obviously exemptions would be a decision for government,
okay.
And the government would need to consider that on a case-by-case basis.
So that's who's it a decision for? Is there provisions in the bill for
Yes, there's
exemptions?
provisions for exemptions within the bill,
there was.
and they're currently done by law. Rules, which will be set out by the
So that's
Treasurer.
a ministerial decision?
Ministerial discretion.
Okay. I'll go to Senator Patrick next, as he has limited time. Senator Patrick.
Thank you very much, Chair. Firstly, you might have heard me asking AUSTRAC or mentioning with other witnesses. I note there was no submission from the Tax Office, which appears to be, or to me, it's quite surprising, and gives me the impression that you are not particularly interested in this bill.
Senator Patrick, thank you. It's not obvious to us from the bill, the Australian Taxation Office, that we, for example, would be the administrative legislation that might flow from this bill when it's passed. And we're certainly not the regulator of the financial sector in Australia. We're not a criminal law enforcement agency, and they seem to be two strong elements that come through from aspects of the bill. So in that aspect, we didn't feel we really had an authority to talk about administration of something which we weren't clearly going to be, or perhaps obviously be the administrator. It's not going really to our strengths, and left space for the agencies we thought might be more relevant to those aspects of the bill. So that's why we didn't present a submission for the committee.
But in some respects, and we're trying to deal with the black economy, which inherently, I presume, means collection of greater taxes for consolidated revenue. Or is the purpose of the bill, in your view, to, as was suggested by the Uniting Church, to basically make life more difficult for people who are, attempting to money launder or so forth, or is the purpose to gain additional revenue?
Well, I defer to my Treasury colleagues about the purpose for the bill, Senator.
Huh? Let's see what Treasury says the purpose of this bill is.
The purpose of the bill is both. Given the high level, we would expect that, the majority of transactions, as the RBA said, is below 10,000. So we are really targeting the more egregious sort of tax evasion strategies here. In relation to who is responsible for the bill, Treasury is responsible for the policy, and we'll also be doing the guidance, so that is different to other tax measures. So once a tax measure is generally passed, responsibility for implementation will move on to the ATO, that is both enforcement and guidance. In this case, guidance will be done by us. Enforcement is probably going to be an amalgam. There is no one agency responsible for this. In relation to taking things to court, it's going to be the AFP and the CDPP. It is a criminal offence, so the AFP will have responsibility. If they investigate something and find a use of cash, they can then investigate that and prosecute. If the ATO find in some of their audits that there's a high chance that someone was using cash above 10,000, they could then pass that information either on to the AFP or to the CDPP if they believe there's enough evidence for prosecution. And that would be the same for something like the Fair Work Ombudsman and ASIC as well. So it's deliberately open, and that is because the black economy, as I said at the start, is a whole of government issue. It's not just a tax issue. So it can show itself up in numerous ways.
So just think about the additional costs this is all going to have. All this extra work for all these other departments. You know? Gumby rollers, no rum tonight. Yeah, no, I've worked through it all already. I've run out. I don't drink that often. So if I buy like a carton, it goes pretty quick. So, that'll probably be it for the year, until next year.
Okay, but I have to consider this legislation on its merits, and that involves trying to understand the benefit that flows from this, because I've certainly got people talking to me about the cost, not necessarily a financial cost, but constituents making complaints about the intention. And this, in some sense, goes to where Senator Brockman was exploring the $10,000 number. I would expect there would be perhaps some analysis, or perhaps qualified by uncertainties, as to if you put the number at 10,000, this is the sort of revenue we expect to generate, or this is the amount of money laundering we expect to inhibit in some way. Versus if you drop it down to 2,000, this is what we then expect. I mean, it might be the case that most people who are conducting illegal activities handing over wads of cash in the $2,000 to $5,000 range, and in that instance, this bill would do very little. That's the bit I'm trying to unpack, and no one to date has provided an answer as to where that benefit lies in return in respect of consolidated revenue, and in relation to the point you've picked at $10,000.
I think a lot of these government numbers, I know when I did a stint in the public service, and because I came just out of university, I was used to everything having an academic reference, and there had to be, evidence behind what you're claiming. And they're just making up bullshit.
Well, it's very hard to actually get data on this, mainly because, as I said before, it's hidden. So the task force...
Would it be fair to say that if this were enacted, you would then also be in a position where...
Oh, hang on, Pub Test has made a good point here. You pay $12,000 for your driveway, and a local council will be triggered to check if you have a DA. Yeah, I can see that happening, eh? Maybe your neighbour will dob you in.
Wouldn't be able to even measure the effect of it.
I think that would be difficult to do, because we don't have a benchmark. What we do have, though, is evidence given to the task force in relation to businesses who know that they are being outbid by other businesses or...
You have anecdotal evidence. How do they know they're being outbid? Because people are doing the cash economy. How do they not know they're being outbid? Like I was, with firms that were offshoring the work. Or that had relationships with government departments, so they were getting a preference.
Offering cash discounts. We do know that crime gangs deal in cash and try to use legitimate economy to wash that cash by buying high-value goods. So that is the evidence which the task force heard, and that is the evidence which was used to make a decision to set this threshold, one, to have a cash payment limit, but also then to set what the appropriate level would be.
So because I'm across a number of different portfolios, and I don't have the time to read that quite extensive report, I wonder if you could pull out on notice the relevant data that shows that would go to the benefit, even if it's only loosely quantifiable, perhaps from those reports and any other information that you have, that says this is why we should support this legislation in the face of a significant number of constituents who are against it.
Yeah, we can pull out the relevant extracts from the report and pass it on to the committee. Okay.
Now, the final question I have, Chair, and it also relates to one of the questions you asked. The exemptions, is that disallowable instrument by which the minister...
Yes, it's certainly a disallowable instrument.
Okay. Now, I always have difficulty with legislation that's put up that doesn't provide the full picture, and I wonder why there wouldn't be any draft instrument that laid out what you were thinking at this point in time in relation to exemptions.
There are two versions of, we've issued two exposure drafts on the supporting rules, which are available up on the Treasury website, and we're happy to provide copies to the committee.
Yeah, once again, had we had a submission, it would have been, a lot of these questions could have been answered. All right, thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you. Senator Gallagher.
Thanks, Chair. I just want to go to this business of competition. So you are saying that there have been submissions to the task force from employers saying that people using cash were undercutting them. I mean, do we know how many submissions? Do we know the level of that, or is it?
So the task force did community halls, community meetings, and that's where a majority of this came from.
So there's no sort of...
Community halls. That's their public engagement, guys. And they're willing to criminalise every person in the country who spends $10,000 cash over that.
Statistical data, it's anecdotal, is it?
It is anecdotal, and I think...
There you go, boom. Boom. Anecdotal evidence. Anecdotal evidence. I've already run out. I needed more rum for this, guys, if I'm doing, a long one.
If you ask most people if they've been offered a lower price for cash, they potentially will say yes.
That's not illegal, is it? Because cash, you get instant. You don't need to worry about people not paying you. Now, if you'd worked in a business, not a government department, and had someone stiff you on an invoice for 90 days, you might appreciate why people want cash. Or if you give them discounts too if they pay you early. Ah, bloody hell, guys. And these are the people that are talking to our leaders. This is why every normal person needs to get more politically active, even if it is a pain in the ass, even if it is a struggle. It's the only way we can shift this Overton window from these idiots. I mean, look at him. I bet you he's a Greta lover.
I've been speaking to people in relation to this matter. Some accountants who have said yes, they are aware of their clients complaining about that they find it harder to compete. And they know the reason for that. They're paying exactly the same input prices, they have to pay exactly the same wages, but they're being undercut by around 10%. And the reason for that is because the person doesn't want to pay their tax bill.
Okay. But I mean...
yeah, come on. Bullshit. There's more to it than that. Some people are faster, some people are better, some people offshore, some people do different things. That's not evidence. That's anecdotal again. Shit, how much of our government legislations and restrictions on our freedom has come from anecdotal bullshit? This has got me really worried now.
You also make submissions to this committee on other legislation where you're proposing an amnesty and forgiving people for not paying their super. Is that not also anti-competitive? I mean, you can't have a competition argument both ways. If you're prepared to have an amnesty for people who haven't paid their super for 26 years and who won't up and want to pay a little bit now, is that not anti-competitive? I think there's a difference between
amnesties and competition. I mean, the whole idea of amnesties is...
What the hell? No. This Gallagher's right on the money here. Businesses who don't pay super, where do you think that money's going? This is why I think employees need to pay their own bloody super. Workers, all the money needs to go to them. They need to pay their own super. They need to pay their own tax. They shouldn't have, their bosses shouldn't be, they're treated like their bloody parents. The reason the government doesn't want that is because it'll shift the Overton window a hell of a lot real quick when people start paying their own bloody tax and their own super, going, oh wait, Why is so much of my money going to the government? Or why is it getting locked in super where I can't touch it?
Getting people back into that system. I'm not sure about the SG, the super guarantee amnesty, but I imagine the purpose of that is to actually get the money into the employee's hands.
Yeah.
So
But there's no record keeping, so it's not likely to happen. That's the reality of that legislation. And that's before this committee and before the parliament. So when you tell me you do a couple of town halls and people complain about cash payments, I can understand that. But I don't think that's empirical evidence.
I think
I'm liking this guy. I'm liking this guy. You know, good work. Good work, Gallagher. See, this is what we need. We need a mix of senators across the spectrum of our citizenry criticising the bullshit that these bureaucrats put to them.
it is, because
Well,
it's advice from one
How many
business
people
what they've
told you
seen
that?
in an environment which they're
How many
competing
people
in.
told you? 10?
Well, it's a task force. I can't tell. It's a
12?
task force before my
So
time.
we're looking for some data.
Well, I think that it is quite common knowledge that people get offered cash.
That's anecdotal again. It's bullshit. Sorry, I'm getting tired. Sample size 1, Jupkek. Yeah. No, wait, guys, Davey has it. Davey has it. It's the vibe. It's the castle. It's the vibe. Guys, it's the vibe. It's the vibe. Serenity. I gotta watch the castle again.
Discounts, in particular around in certain industries, for work which has been done, and they get offered much lower cash than they do for electronic transactions.
And this is the solution to fix that, is it?
Well, that's one of the purposes. Yes, we're trying to stop people from offering cash, paying cash above $10,000.
So the Reserve Bank's evidence was about 25% of cash in circulation goes in and out on transactions. About 4% is in the black economy. You agree with that?
Well, 4 to 8%, they said.
Well, make it 8%. That still leaves a whole lot of money which people have chosen to collect.
Yes.
And this legislation now is placing imposition on how their legitimately collected money can be spent. Is that fair?
It's putting an obligation on businesses and them in relation to what they can spend that money on. Yes.
Okay,
that
so you
is
can't
what
go and
the
buy a
implication
jet ski for $15,000 after this comes on with the money you got under your bed.
is. No, you can't.
Okay.
There you go. There you go.
And
But they
why
can
would you
still
be
get that
seeking to
jet
stop
ski.
that?
Because,
That's a
sorry?
legitimate use of your money.
But I suppose the issue is whether that's legitimate or illegitimate money. So that is hard to distinguish. And so you actually, if you want to stop criminals laundering money, you need to be able to put a limit on it. So it's impossible for the jet ski proprietor to say, yes, you look suspect, I'm not going to accept your money, as opposed
Oh, then they'll say, it'll be in the media. He wouldn't take my money because he's racist, or he wouldn't take my money because, discrimination.
to, oh, you look okay, I will accept your money.
Well,
So if you want to have something which is changing or having targeting money laundering, this is the sort of provision which you do need to do that.
well, I mean, not everybody's sold on that idea because, suggesting that people who've stored cash rather than having it in a bank are illegal or in the black market or in a criminal enterprise would clearly be a very, very long bow given the statistics provided by the Reserve Bank. And if you listen to the funeral industry, there are a number of ethnic groups who like to pay for their funerals in cash. And that would currently, or in the future, be illegal if they managed to take $200 a week out of their pension for 5 years with a simple view that they wanted to pay their funeral before they go. And if they go to the funeral director with cash, that's illegal. Why are you trying to stop that?
Well, the issue is we're trying to stop money laundering, and you have to
Fully
actually
support
have
that.
it across. You have to have it across the economy. You have to have it across all transactions for that to be effective.
Okay.
If you don't, then it's not effective. Then basically you won't have a system which can actually target money laundering in an effective way.
Okay, so if the black economy is between 4 and 6 or 8%, how does that stack up? How do you actually measure that? How do you work it out that it's between 4 and 8%, or you just
Oh,
rely
that's an RBA number. That's 48% of how much
Well,
cash is used.
you've got a head of economy, head of a black economy. I'd like to see your business card ring that go down well. Division head, black economy division. Does that mean?
Yeah, that's me.
So what is the size of it then if you're head of that division?
Well, it's actually been defined in the report at 3% of the economy.
3%.
So at the time there was about 50 billion. The economy would have grown since then, so it's a bit higher if it's still at 3%. That is the estimate of the task force. I have seen estimates as high as 13%. I've seen estimates at 9%. The issue with this is that they are hidden transactions. The reason you're in the black economy is that you don't want to get caught. You're doing things to either avoid taxes, you're doing things for criminal activities. They aren't things that people generally put on surveys that, yes, I'm involved in this or this or this. So it's hard for the ABS to track that. There are different ways in which you try and make a determination of how large the cash economy is or the black economy. But they are estimates.
I understand, but I mean, you're already doing this work anyway. I'm just curious as to why this is suddenly a panacea for work you've been doing forever. So if you look at the transport industry, you know, it's alleged that people will turn up at a truck auction, pay 100 grand for the truck cash. All of a sudden they've got legitimate business expenses now. They pay fuel, they pay tyres, they pay repairs, and they're in a business that's turning over money and it looks like real money, goes through a bank account. Who knows where the cash is coming to generate the startup? Do you track that sort of activity?
Well, we can't. Well, no, at the moment, unless it's covered by the AUSTRAC system.
So there's a suggestion, not a suggestion. It's supposedly everybody in Sydney knows that you know, the timber industry's you know, a vehicle for people laundering cash, and the big government contracts like Badgerys Creek and the rest of it, they would be feeding those excavation and earth moving companies. Do you look at them?
Well, Treasury doesn't. I'm not saying another enforcement agency may not.
So, I mean, there's a groundswell of people who made submissions to this committee, which may be well out of your purvey because they're not in the black economy, they're just people who may occasionally choose to pay cash. Yeah, they're not criminals.
The evidence from the RBA is it's very, very low, the amount of transactions above 10,000 which aren't done in cash, based on their survey.
But you wouldn't know because no one's going to write and tell you if they paid cash, are they?
Well, they don't, no. But we know it happens. Yeah. So I wouldn't say that the fact that they don't do that means it doesn't happen. I'm pretty sure it does happen. If you look at law enforcement, Europol has basically said, yes, cash is the main source of transactions for criminal gangs. Yeah. I think most criminal enforcement agencies would say that cash is also the way which most criminal gangs do their transactions.
So how will it change?
Sorry, could I just interrupt there for a sec? From flowing on from the work done putting together this report, obviously there are prosecutions on people who are doing things illegally, who are laundering money.
Yes.
So do we have any backwards looking information that would reveal for the committee the kind of transactions that would be prevented under this legislation?
What do you reckon? Do you think they'll have it? Do you think they'll have it? Will he not have it? Will he take it on notice? Let me know in the comments, guys. And smash that like. If you haven't been here, guys, we've got 88 viewers. Let's get the likes up to 88.
So can we point to actual examples? Do you understand what I'm getting at?
Yeah, I think we would need to speak to the AFP.
Who would the committee speak to? The AFP?
It would probably be the AFP. Maybe, well, I'm not sure if you asked that question of AUSTRAC.
Well, we didn't.
Because that information would basically come from AUSTRAC. AUSTRAC does not enforce, so they don't go off and actually do criminal prosecutions. That's my understanding. So they would pass that on to another organisation to do that on their behalf, and it's more likely to be the AFP.
Okay, because I think the committee would like to get a sense of, I guess we've got an issue where people are concerned about being able to carry out legitimate transactions above $10,000 in cash versus the prevention of money laundering and illegal tax evasion, that's a tautology, tax evasion, which obviously the committee is absolutely on board with preventing. So it would be good to get a sense of that issue in the real world.
So you're...
Real world? Senators, are you expecting bureaucrats to know about the real world?
You mentioned the 3%. Is there any, your first evidence there was that there was a 3% black economy? Is that underpinned by statistics or?
It's an estimate from the task force. We can get the extract on how that was calculated.
Okay, excellent. So tell me, why will this legislation suddenly stop people who are out there doing the wrong thing and suddenly, are you saying it's simply they won't be able to spend their cash?
That's right.
But what if they just spend $6,000 at a time? What if they, would they
it's all about disruption. So at the moment, they want high value goods.
But the RBA have already said there's so few purchases made at that limit in cash.
Because one, it's less transactions for them. Yeah. And also there's a higher chance for them to be able to sell it. If I'm buying something $6,000 and let's say I have to move $2 million, you're looking at multiple transactions at $2 million. Once again, harder for them to do it. They'll need to get more people out there buying $6,000 goods, but they might be stuck with these goods, which they don't need. Yep. So they tend to use things which they can then on-sell. So
that's the 1.5 million.
That's 1.5 million cars. So basically, they got that, they probably sold them.
How do you become aware of that now?
That was passed on to Michael Andrew from the car dealership.
But you
wouldn't
be aware of that, is that what you're saying?
Well, no.
So when that business does its report, it just logs...
So it doesn't do an AML report. So it may not have done an AML report in relation to that transaction.
But if they deposited that money into a bank, that would have been reported.
Yes, but then you don't know who the person is. So...
Well, you know who got it. You know who deposited it.
Well, the depositor would have been the car dealer.
So can't you just go out and say, well, that was a rather large week for you. Did you do all right that week? I mean, isn't that what you do?
Well, it would have been deposited. The bank should have then passed that on to Austrac.
Maybe it was Westpac.
And then it's up to enforcement agencies to determine whether it's something which they would then proceed with. So for some person, it may not register for a few months. In that case, the thing is gone. The cars have been sold, no way of tracing them. And so the chances of an effective prosecution have probably reduced quite significantly. In relation to this, if there is something there, we would hope that the legitimate businesses would say, no, sorry, I can't do that, you have to do it electronically.
Right.
That is.
So what they're hoping is that they're going to make it more onerous for people. It's going to be a pain in the ass for so many normal citizens, so they can just make it slightly harder for criminals to launder their money. How many people will say, yeah, I'll take it, and only book the 10 grand?
The way you disrupt the illegal behaviour. You have the honest business who will comply, saying, I cannot sell that goods to you because it's above $10,000. So effectively, that's the way you get a much greater enforcement and much greater effect of this legislation, because there's also a penalty in relation to that business selling.
Yeah, and I think that's where the inherent difficulty is in some respects from people who've made submissions saying, well, I haven't done anything wrong, why are you looking at me? Because you're actually using them to police the activity of others.
Yeah, it's pretty similar to...
There it goes. There you go. Using the citizens to police each other. Where have we seen that before in history, guys? Where have we seen that before in history? What's so bad about that? Getting your citizens to dob each other in when they've been naughty. You know? I think it's time we all read the Gulag Archipelago again.
It's similar to like a bribery sort of provision. So bribery, you have a penalty on both offering and accepting a bribe. Not saying that these are briberies and that other businesses involved in bribes, but that it's effectively a similar principle. You actually need someone to say, no, I can't accept that bribe, to stop the bribe happening.
Okay. But in this circumstance, you're never going to get anybody to give themselves up because they're both going to get done, aren't they? No one's going to
we would
say,
expect
"Oh, I made a
that
mistake."
they won't have to give themselves up if they're compliant with the law. So if they're compliant with the law, basically the criminal gang who's trying to purchase the good above $10,000 won't be able to do it.
Are you certain that that's the way it's going to work?
Well, that's what we would hope.
Well, I mean, you know, you're going to just...
We do know from the ATO that there's a high level of natural compliance with the tax law.
No, I'm sure that most
So most
people...
Australians will comply.
The ATO's
Here's what he said there. Most Australians will comply. We're a compliant little people, aren't we? This is why when all people are saying they'll march on the street and there'll be yellow vest protests here in Australia, I can't see it happening. Not in our civilization, not with our culture at the moment.
reputation is such that you just pay your tax and move on.
But I think most people naturally comply with rules. And so that is a way of making this a much more effective outcome.
This will generate how much more data? So there's no reporting at the moment?
Well, if every business above 10,000 doesn't, every business trying to sell something above 10,000 doesn't accept it, it's no new data. Because basically all it's like, it would be a legitimate transaction. So let's say I'm buying your jet ski for $12,000, $15,000. I pay with a credit card as opposed to paying, I can't pay with cash, so I'll pay with a credit card. So what you might find is, and what we already found from what the RBA said, they're not matching, they're not finding any contributions above, or transactions above 10,000 in cash anyway.
Right.
So if your benchmark is zero, we'd expect that to be zero.
So why have we got nearly 3,000 submissions to this fairly
I think there's some confusion, and probably legitimate confusion about what this is doing. We have had people call us, and a lot of the confusion is that they believe this is stopping them taking money out of the bank, that the transaction is actually a withdrawal transaction, and that's not the case. You'll be able to put in much money in the bank and take out as much money in the bank and store as much money in a private area as you wish. All it does is target transactions. And once we've described that to people who phoned us, they've said, oh, okay, that's fine. There is that misunderstanding of what this provision will do.
Oh, we're just all dumb idiots who don't understand. That's what it is. Yep, that's why we all made all those submissions. We're just dumb plebs. Oh, we're lucky we've got bureaucrats like this who've never worked in a real business or never met payroll. Yes, or never risked their own mortgage in their professional lives.
So even with like we would expect, and let's say with your $15,000 example, that businesses will adjust. And we've already heard businesses which are preparing for people who want to pay cash, that they pay it directly into their bank account. So in that case, they've kept their ability to use cash. It's still meeting the law because basically it's a deposit into a bank account which is not covered by the law. They can still do that. It'll be up to the business and whether they wish to do that or not.
So instead of handing the cash to the business, you hand it to their bank?
Or an agent who will accept that money, which will put it into the bank
and
account.
And then there'll be a cost associated with that.
That complies with this?
They'll comply with the law.
And that would be zero transaction cost.
I'm not sure what
Bullshit.
would be.
I don't even get...
I imagine it will be. Yeah, right. Yep. Sure, mate.
Charge for depositing money?
No, I don't think so.
Probably working on it.
That'd be up to the bank. That'd be up to the business, and whether they actually would allow them to do that.
Okay.
So that would get information then, because basically it's within the banking system. That's where we want that money to be in relation to higher value transactions.
So it's two individuals in the community swapping $20,000 is no issue?
If it's individual to individual,
yeah.
That will be exempt.
Okay.
If it's...
Isn't that money laundering? Aren't the criminals putting money to each other? So the drug dealers, if they're doing it individual to individual, if they don't have an ABM, it'll be exempt then. So guys, they don't even need to worry. They don't even need to worry, guys, because it won't be illegal.
It's individual to a
So this is just going to be a pain in the arse. A bloody pain in the arse.
to an entity which has a business purpose, that would be caught.
So the example that Senator Gallagher gave earlier, where he has an ABN that he hasn't used for a number of
And remember, guys, the casinos wanted to be exempt from this.
years, he would not be caught for a private transaction.
If it's
Like,
private, no.
unless there was a tax invoice
Yep.
being issued by one party.
Well, the way which you would think about that, if the senator purchased something and then started to claim deductions on that, that is obviously for a business purpose.
Okay.
If you're using it for personal reasons, no, you won't be caught.
How about the issue that the Law Council, who was it? The Law...
Alliance, was it?
The Law Council raised, I think it was the Law Council, to do with effectively the person at the front end of the business who's actually taking the money, but who's an employee, potentially making them liable. Is that just a question of education for the business in your
That's a
view?
question
or-
for education for the business. So
Is that the
both
flight?
parties-
Is
sorry?
that the flight centre example?
That, I think, is a flight centre example. Yeah.
So the person both paying and receiving are both liable for it. So it's a matter of education for businesses.
So the employees could be liable. Oh boy. This is just going to be a huge, huge pain for a lot of citizens for insignificant benefit.
And we're certainly pushing it on that because the business itself would also be liable, provided the employee is authorised to do so, and there's an obligation on businesses to change their internal procedures to prevent that happening. That said, it's not all that frequent that you would, turn up at Bunnings with $10,000 worth of cash and the person at the register would accept that.
But what about when it gets reduced to $2,000 in cash? I did that when it was my end of year exhibition. I went to BWS and spent thousands on booze for a party. It happens.
I think something's not questionable when receiving it. So. But the amounts of this magnitude are unusual.
So can I just use that example again? So if you go to the flight centre and you've saved up $3,000 and you hand it over, and then a month or two later you've got another $6 and you give it to them, and then you give them the final $2, gets you over the threshold. Is that captured by this or not?
So is this in respect to the same
Yes, so it's
supplies?
the same
It's
holiday.
the same holiday?
Same holiday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if it's the same holiday, you can make multiple payments up until you hit $10,000.
Okay.
The rest
See, and now he's contradicted what we were told by, what was it, Austrac or Treasury? Or the Reserve Bank, the RBA, so there's a contradiction there.
of it has to be electronic.
But if it's the individual who's taken the money who's liable, as well as the business, what if you went to 3 different people where you would potentially, would they have to remember that someone had been in and paid that account in cash before? I mean, is that what the flight attendant's saying?
There's an expectation.
Wow, you'd have to... you do modifications to all the accounting software and the point of sale software. This is going to cost a lot of money for businesses. This is another cost for businesses, for doing business. This is another noose around the neck of Australian businesses.
That businesses will need to alter their internal systems to track how they're receiving payments from individuals coming in, so that they can say, in those cases where it's, we're not talking about like a coal scenario where you're buying different products.
Yeah.
It has to be the same product that you're paying off over time. Their systems will have to track the means by which those payments have been received. If the individual innocently takes the payment thinking that they haven't received multiple payments before, they're unaware of them, then they've got a defence of innocent mistake. So you wouldn't hold the individual liable in those.
You just need to make sure you pay your lawyer's fees in credit card.
Particular cases, because they've checked on the system. From what they can see on the records, they've not received any other payments in cash. They received that payment, it puts them over. That's an innocent mistake, and the individual wouldn't be punished.
What about people who have ABN numbers for work? So I mean, there are employers out there who ask people to come along with just their clothes on their back and an ABN number.
Yes.
What happens there? I mean, if they were to earn $10,000 in a month?
It all depends how they were paid. If they were paid fortnightly,
Sorry?
if they were paid fortnightly or whatnot. It's a business transaction. If they're working for someone, it's a business transaction.
So they couldn't get paid cash?
No.
They couldn't receive a payment of more than $10,000.
Yeah, well, more than cash, yeah.
They certainly could be paid over time, because if they're being paid over time in respect of work for like the previous week and it's less than $10,000, then they'll continue to get multiple cash payments. It's only if they're receiving one single lump sum payment that's in excess of $10,000, or the payment is in respect to the same supply.
So all of the subcontracting industry, where it might be a bricklayer or whatever, working for a larger company, present an invoice. You're saying there's no evidence that that's cash. You're saying that, well, using the Reserve Bank, they don't get paid cash. Is that what you're saying?
Just want to bring up Rob's comment here. Yeah, but Bank of Queensland already refuses certain businesses on moral grounds. Try and set up a tattoo parlor with BOQ. See what happens. Did a video on it.
So subcontractors, they put an invoice in after they've done 20,000 bricks, so the bill will be $20,000. Now, are you saying that all of that is electronic payments now?
No. I think what we're saying is that under this legislation, they'd only be able to pay it up to 10,000, and the rest would have to be done electronically. I think there probably may be situations where it is paid in cash.
And who's going to enforce all of this? I know you mentioned there's multi-jurisdictional, but in a perfect world you wouldn't need it because no one will do it.
Well, that would be the same for any law. I mean, if in the perfect world we wouldn't need police forces, because you potentially would say, okay, we're going to put in something on drink driving, no one will drink drive again. That's not the case. So you need some enforcement. I imagine that this will be found through investigations. So, for example, if the AFP is investigating a criminal gang, as part of that investigation, they may find that the criminal gang has made a payment above $10,000, and then that will be another penalty which they could then prosecute that.
This seems we're giving up a lot of liberties and personal freedom for very little gain. Just doesn't feel right at all.
That gang or gang member for, in relation to transactions which are done by willing parties, they are always difficult to find. So, money handed over in a private residence, it'd be difficult to find. I think in that case, what we are relying on is if cash is offered to a homeowner, and the homeowner is not prepared to do that, but they are prepared to then say this person has offered me a cash discount, they could call the ATO's Black Economy line.
Oh, great, you can dob them in. And yet when I contacted all these agencies to inform them about the cloud token wallet scam that was ripping off a whole lot of Australians using an ASIC number, what do you think they did? Bugger all.
At that stage, the person hasn't breached anything, but the person may be breaching other tax law. So there's potential that they may get caught that way.
Maybe they'll get a reward when you can dob each other in. You know, you'll get a month holiday out of the gulag.
So I imagine we could potentially get a lot of a lot of dob-ins from it, but they won't be prosecuted for a breach of the $10,000 limit. They might be found guilty of other offences.
Okay. So what about donations? That's always a topic of discussion.
Donations are caught. Yeah.
Donations to entities registered with the GST are caught.
Yep. There was a question asked if you're not in church earlier, what if someone left you 20 grand in cash? Could you take it?
I think we've previously had the example where you don't necessarily, if there's like a church box. I mean, if someone actually physically hands some...
Notice the Uniting Church guy in the background? He's still there.
Goes to hand the church $10,000 or $20,000 in cash. The church can't accept that, but the church wouldn't know if someone put it in the box at the back. Well, there's just a box full of amounts, and the church is unaware, of course, as to how that money got there, what the makeups were, in which case it just deposits it.
But
So it's in no
clearly
position
all political organisations would be caught up by this legislation.
They certainly would, yes.
So cash donations would be...
Well, cash donations of $10,000 or more.
Between two ABN numbers would be... It'd be, what is it, 120?
Even a private individual to a political party, it couldn't be in excess of
a private individual
$10,000
to a political
yes.
party? Yeah.
Yes. That'd be
So that'd be 120 penalty points and 2 years jail, is it?
the maximum penalty.
It's a maximum penalty. There's also the strict liability provision, which is a lower amount of money as well, lower amount of penalty points.
So what's your tip? Who's the first one going to get prosecuted? The bikies or the politicians? I don't have to answer that.
I will say bikies.
Good answer. Good answer. I take it that was your last question.
Yeah. Go on.
All right. Thank you very much for your time today. That concludes today's hearing. On behalf of the committee, I'd like to thank all those who have made submissions and sent representatives here today for their cooperation in this inquiry. I thank the Secretariat, Hansard, Broadcasting, and on that note, the committee stands adjourned.
Thank you.
Well, there you go, guys. So we've watched tonight Treasury, ATO, Austrac and the Reserve Bank. Yesterday we looked at the farmers, the Australian funeral directors, and the Uniting Church. So, what do you reckon? What do you reckon? I think it's good to see some of the senators, being critical of it and asking some pointed questions. And you can see that all the submissions, just the huge body of submissions that have come in from normal people, they're aware of and they're responding to. So that was good. That was good. Is this the end of this stage? Yes, this is and then they've got on the 10th of Jan, they get their questions coming back, answers to their questions. So we'll have to see what happens then. Crunchy saying I missed the first two people. Yes, I didn't start recording it in time. I'll have to see if I can get it. I can get it down from the website from the government. This is stuff I recorded on my other computer, guys. So we'll see. I'll let you know if I can get it. I'll let you know if I can get it in time. Lulu's telling me to go to bed. Yes, I'm bloody tired. I'm going to bed. What is it? 9:56. Yeah, I'm going straight to bed. I'm going straight to bed. Jupkek, it sounds like it all originated from the Uniting Church. Well, I think the United Church gentleman was good friends with the Black Economy Task Force. But the fact that it's all this anecdotal bullshit evidence, I need to go through this thing, because if it's just based on this anecdotal stuff, guys, what do you reckon? Twitch donations, I don't know how that'll be affected, mate, with the Cashban. I'm sure it will, But yeah. So it'll be interesting to see, guys. It will be interesting to see. Thanks for hanging out and for watching. Smash those likes so we all go. So it spreads far and wide, even though it's funny, all these live streams about the Senate witnesses, they've all been limited state monetization. I don't know why. We'll see. None of them been approved. Senate Cashban witnesses, probably. Maybe witnesses is a trigger word. Rob's worried. He thinks we're in trouble. Mate, we'll be fine in the end. It's only money. Australia's a bunch of good little well-behaved people. They'll all behave. Clean your broom. The Uniting Church are barely Christian. Yeah, it's oh well. I've had some interesting encounters at the Uniting Church. A few churches I went into where there was literally there was the whole sermon, everything. No mention of Christ. It was all about social justice right there, and yeah. It was nuts. Hey, Tom, thank you very much for the super chat, mate. I appreciate it. Well, I'll tell you what your donations are going for. I bought a new drawing tablet today, so I can do my diagrams and sketching. They're gone so cheap. So cheap when I last did it because my surfaces are all dead, and I've got a video I've done about this cracking car park. I wanted to do some sketching. That was my investment in the channel today. So thank you for that. I appreciate the help. So yeah. Those people are possessed. Oh, they're a funny mob. They're definitely social justicey. They really are. Dupkek went to the Indra one. Yeah, actually, one of my friends that I interviewed on the channel, the insurance broker, I think he went out in the Uniting Church and he left it, went somewhere a bit more, all too a bit feminine. You think Crunchy's saying that Australian people are muppets and the leaders know it as well? I think a lot of people are just disengaged, to be honest. I think they're disengaged. They're too busy. I mean, if you're struggling to pay the bills, you're struggling to pay your mortgage, you're worried about finding your job, you just put all this political shit to the side, you don't worry about it, and you just keep going, you know? I think the challenge is to wake people up and get them politically active. Seeing the UK election results, it would be interesting, because I bet you the Conservatives would have won even more seats if they had preferential voting like we had here. Because there are a few of them where you had the Brexit and the Conservatives together would have been higher than the Labour Party, so it would have been interesting. You know? So I like the system we have here. Just more people need to be educated in how powerful it is and how good it is. Because you can be strategic. Gumby Rolls is already counting his sleep. Good night, mate. And Horizon people that get most riled up when they can't put food on the table, yeah. And Crunchy's reminding us the first step to negative interest rates as well. Yep. Rob is asking to catch up for a coffee. Oh, mate, it's tough. Saturday's family day. I'm going, we're doing a family photo shoot. You know, Rachel, that's her present she's wanted. So she went and bought new clothes for all the kids. So we're going out and getting everyone photographed, which I hope is not going to rain because our yard is nothing but dirt. So they'll be covered in mud. I'll organize something next year, like a meet-up, an event, I think. So I reckon it'd be good to get a whole lot of people together in an event, you know. I think people would enjoy that. Be good to meet other similar-minded people then, particularly in business. Lulu is saying get more involved in council meetings. Yeah, we do. Guys, I'm calling it quits tonight. Take care, everyone. How long have we been going? A few hours. Just businessmen, no YouTube crap. Well, it's the same thing. Same thing. You get businesses. I've got a lot of you. Well, I put this out on my LinkedIn too. So I've got business colleagues too, and you get a lot of people, particularly with the age demo we have on the channel here. You want to do business with people that aren't going to be social justice pains in the ass, are they? I mean, that's one of the reasons why I'm putting this out there, because I don't give a crap anymore. If it means that I won't get people approaching me that don't want to work with me because they don't like my politics, it's good, because they're usually the bastards that don't pay on time. You know? Okay, Thomas, get some work done. Good night, everyone. I'm going to bed. Thanks for watching. Yeah, it's only been what? Oh, yeah, 3 hours. Shit. I'll see you all later. Bye, everyone.